This bald young man was a notoriously ruthless bully at school, striking fear into anyone who crossed his path. But after just 3 months at a reform center, he ended up in a wheelchair, permanently disabled. It turned out that, utterly helpless against the rising tide of juvenile delinquency, the South Korean government had decided to abolish the Juvenile Protection Act. Now, any underage criminals would be sent straight to a military-run facility for rehabilitation. If they dared to disobey, the guards would teach them a lesson using harsh physical methods. Minsu was just an ordinary student, but he was framed by someone else and forced into this place. He thought his life was over, condemned to suffer in this living hell. Unexpectedly, from a weakling who was always bullied, Minsu turned the tables, climbing his way up step by step until he finally became the absolute boss of this prison. At a local high school, Nurse Kim couldn't hide her surprise when she saw a long line of students waiting in front of the mobile blood donation bus. The number of participants at this school was many times higher than anywhere else. The nurses constantly praised the kids' admirable spirit, even though they found it strange since teenagers these days rarely cared much for donating blood. However, the truth behind that long line was nowhere near as noble as they thought. The students were clamoring, urging each other, "Hurry up! The time to exchange for cash is almost up." A curious male student asked, "How much can we get for one blood donation voucher?" And he received a confident reply, 5,001. In a corner of the schoolyard, Minsu sat on a box, his hands swiftly counting thick stacks of cash. Seeing a hesitant customer, he quickly pitched, All right, here are 2 vouchers, 10,001 in total. Come back next time." The students scrambled around him, eager to exchange their vouchers for cash to top up their games, ignoring the fact that their lunch break was almost over. Minsu flashed a sly smile as he explained his trick. He agreed to buy back a 5,001 gift voucher for 10,001. It sounded like a losing deal, but his real target was the blood donation vouchers that came with them. He knew very well that the hidden value of each blood donation voucher was around 12,001. As long as he posted them on online forums for 10,001 to those in urgent need of blood transfusions, messages from buyers would flood in endlessly. However, the reason no one dared to pull this off was that it was highly illegal. But for Minsu, an underage teen, there was absolutely no fear. He arrogantly believed that even if he got caught, he'd only receive a mere warning. The current state of society was deteriorating, as juvenile crimes ranging from violence, theft, and fraud to even murder had crossed all boundaries. Even when facing the most serious offenses, the law still couldn't properly punish them. Counting the wad of cash in his hand, Minsu muttered to himself, "Only 600,000? Business is slow this month." He nonchalantly assumed that the police would never bother with victimless crimes like this. However, the reality of business was never as easy as he thought. Just as his complacency blossomed, a devastating kick suddenly flew straight into his face, sending Minsu tumbling as all his cash and gift vouchers scattered across the ground. He bitterly realized that once he chose the path of crime, he would soon become the target of another crime himself. Minsu lay sprawled on the ground, coughing violently in pain as footsteps steadily approached. He understood the price one had to pay for profiting off crimes. There was no use complaining, for no one here would ever offer sympathy. A group of tall young men surrounded him. A blond guy flashed a malicious smile and asked, "Minsu, did you make a lot of money today?" Minsu could only grit his teeth and curse silently in helplessness, knowing full well that in this godforsaken place, he had no one to protect him. Looking up at the wall covered in slogans about rehabilitation laws and a world free of school violence, Minsu felt it was just a stupid, ridiculous joke. He despised this wretched world, believing those moral words were nothing but empty talk that solved absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, the bullies kept mocking and hurling insults at him. One of them even casually sprayed something, making the surrounding air pungent. The leader took a drag of his cigarette and roughly pressed Minsu's head against the pavement. He growled a threat. "If you have money, you better pay your dues. You want to end up a cripple in rehab?" Finishing his sentence, the guy casually spat right into Minsu's face with sheer contempt. He stated firmly that without Chang-soo, Minsu was absolutely nothing. The bully's face suddenly showed a hint of dread at the mention of that name. He admitted that Chang-soo was 100 times more terrifying than him. "But you know what? Chang-soo is getting released today." Minsu's eyes widened, trembling in absolute terror upon hearing the name Chang-soo. Chang-Su was actually the kingpin of a criminal syndicate formed by delinquent youths in the area. Almost everyone had been his victim, but absolutely no one dared to claim that they were. Why? Because they were terrified of the brutal retaliation that would take place in the dark corners untouched by the law. Truth be told, he was a complete maniac, someone capable of doing the most horrific things without batting an eye. Back to the scene, the bullies didn't stop laughing when they saw Min-Soo shaking with fear. "You talk like you're close to him. Is Chang-Su your buddy or something?" They gloated over his miserable state and continued their extortion. "Come on, pay your taxes. You wouldn't want Chang-Su to hate you, right?" Min-Soo lowered his head, reaching into his pocket as if to grab his money, and muttered, "Ah, I got it." "Take it." However, instead of handing over cash, he suddenly flipped them off and roared in furious defiance, "Here, a gift for you bastards. Take it." This provocative gesture bruised the ego of the leader, Tai Wung. He screamed in pure rage, "Are you tired of living? How dare you mess with me?" Instantly, a brutal beating rained down on him, leaving Min-Soo curled up on the ground, taking every blow. The cronies standing by didn't intervene. Instead, they laughed. Tai Wung is pissed. This kid really loses his temper easily. Blinded by rage, Tai Wung grabbed a nearby shovel and bellowed, "Don't stop me, I'm going to end this punk today." Ignoring warnings that he might end up in the reform center, he frantically declared that he would make Min-Soo fear him forever, just like he feared Chang-Su. But before the shovel could even swing down, a massive impact suddenly struck him, sending him crashing to the ground instantly. Witnessing that horrifying scene, his underlings stood rooted to the spot, their faces pale with sheer terror. A strange foot suddenly appeared right before his eyes, forcing Min-Soo, despite his severe injuries, to look up in sheer astonishment. "School violence is strictly prohibited," a stern voice rang out, shattering the tense atmosphere. It was Yu Xiong, the student council president. He calmly took off his glasses, stepped closer to help Min-Soo up, and kindly asked, "Are you okay, Min-Soo?" The surrounding students began to murmur. They quickly recognized their usually model president, but couldn't fathom why he was here looking so completely different. Furious at the interruption, Tai Wung screamed, "Who the hell are you?" He swung the shovel, threatening to kill them all, claiming that going to rehab afterward wouldn't be too late. Facing such aggression, Yu Xiong dodged gracefully, causing Tai Wung's swing to hit nothing but thin air. Before his opponent could even recover, Yu Xiong grabbed him by the shoulder, pulled him close, and roared, "Have you ever killed anyone?" He ruthlessly slammed Tai Wung's head onto the pavement, making him scream in agony. Yu Xiong coldly warned him about the heavy price of taking someone else's life. The sickening crunch of bones echoed alongside Tai Wung's desperate shrieks. "Ah, wait! I give up! I give up!" In extreme agony, he frantically screamed orders for his lackeys to attack Yu Xiong. Seeing their boss humiliated, the remaining cronies lunged forward. "You bastard, you think you're safe after meddling?" However, Yu Xiong maintained an incredibly terrifying composure. He continuously dodged and unleashed precise counterattacks, sending the bullies crumbling one by one. Yu Xiong grabbed one by the head and violently slammed him to the ground without a shred of mercy. Witnessing that horrifying spectacle, the last lackey was so terrified he could barely stand. He stammered an excuse, claiming he was just pretending to attack, and begged Yu Xiong to stay away. "No, wait, seriously, don't come any closer, please don't." Screams of pain rang out as Yu Xiong decisively finished off the bullies. "I told you, school violence is prohibited." Staring at the student council president's back, Min-Soo softly called out, "Hyung, Yu Xiong." Hearing his name, Yu Xiong paused, his hand still firmly gripping an opponent's collar. He turned his head and gave a meaningful smile. "Call me brother. Why use my real name?" Min-Soo replied with bitter venom, "Brother! You bastard, you haven't been my brother for a long time. Stop meddling in my business." Yu Xiong firmly stated, "You are my little brother. No matter what you think, we're still brothers." Faced with such resolve, Min-Soo could only turn away in silence. Yu Xiong glanced at his little brother's wrist and made a mocking remark about the old watch, telling him to throw it away because it was humiliating for someone adopted by a rich family to wear something so cheap. On Min-Soo's wrist was a watch engraved with the words Penguin Orphanage, a keepsake he had always deeply treasured. Seeing Min-Soo walk away silently, Yu Xiong shouted, asking if he was going to class, only to receive a dismissive reply, "Whatever, I'm going home." Yusong sighed in frustration, silently cursing his brother for being a fool. However, a secret lay on the wrist of that brilliant, wealthy student council president. He was wearing the exact same old orphanage watch as his little brother. As Minsu walked, he was torn with guilt. He feared that Yuseong's involvement in these brawls would ruin his chances of getting into medical school. One was the student council president, an elite student guaranteed a spot at a prestigious medical school, while the other was a delinquent. The cruel irony was that they were actually blood brothers. His older brother's real name was Lee Hyun-soo, but after being adopted by a wealthy family, he changed it to Yuseong. While the older brother had stepped into a glorious new chapter of his life, Minsu silently retreated to the same old place. He stopped in front of the gates of the Penguin Orphanage, the very place where he remained trapped by reality. Walking alone through a deserted alley, Minsu's heart felt heavy with thoughts of his older brother. He told himself that Yusong shouldn't get involved with him anymore, so he wouldn't become a burden that hindered his bright future. While Yusong was moving toward the light, Minsu chose a dark, separate path just to survive. He stopped in front of an old, chained-up clothing donation bin, the secret stash for all the money he had saved up over time. Inside the bag lay wads of cash and blood donation vouchers, totaling 3.4 million won. Huddling in the dark corner, Minsu calculated, "Still short 6.6 million. Maybe I should just rob a bank." He was worried because it would be 3 months before the blood donation bus returned to his school, so he started considering going to other schools to keep making money. Minsu's obsession with money stemmed from a harsh reality. In just 2 years, he would have to leave the Penguin Orphanage. Although he'd receive a 5 million won government subsidy, that amount was a drop in the bucket compared to the expensive rent. As an underage orphan, he knew all too well that even applying for part-time jobs would end in rejection. Such a miserable fate. Even knowing his actions were illegal, it was the only way to make quick money and stop being a burden to his brother. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over Minsu from behind. The bully, his face contorted in a sinister smirk, sneered mockingly. "Our little Minsu sure is loaded, huh?" he said, roughly clamping a hand onto Minsu's shoulder. Leaning close to his ear, he maliciously threatened that all a criminal's money would be confiscated by the state once they were caught. Faced with his manic laughter and sickening closeness, Minsu could only tremble and ask in fear, What do you want?" He growled, repeating his earlier arrogant declaration. "I already told you I'll make you piss your pants every time you see me." While Minsu was plunged into a desperate situation back at school, the atmosphere remained entirely normal. As the students chattered excitedly, Yusong sat calmly at his desk taking notes. The teacher's crisp voice rang out, demanding the class to settle down and take their seats as the lesson began. "Is everyone seated? Now, here's a new announcement." The teacher walked into the classroom with a beaming face, announcing that Chang-soo, the one who had terrified so many before going to the reform center, had officially returned. The teacher even hoped the class would help him reintegrate, believing he had reflected deeply on his actions. The students murmured below, thinking they were in for serious trouble this time. They knew full well that a reform center meant nothing to someone like Chang-soo, considering he was released after just 4 weeks. Chang-soo, the ringleader of the juvenile delinquent gang, the unstoppable renegade, had now appeared. But the reality left everyone absolutely stunned. Instead of an imposing boss, Chang-soo was now just a cripple in a wheelchair, his face vacant with a pitiful, gaping mouth. His glorious past had faded away, leaving behind a soulless shell who only knew how to smile mindlessly. The disgust reached its peak when someone shouted, "He pissed himself!" Having lost all behavioral control, Chang-soo relieved himself right then and there in front of everyone. The class fell into a state of panic, horrified and disgusted. "Teacher, Chang-soo peed his pants." His mother hastily wheeled her pathetic son out amidst the clamor of whispers about the mad state of the once terrifying figure. Everything stemmed from the official implementation of the Special Juvenile Reform Act. The highly controversial Juvenile Protection Act had been completely abolished. Replaced by much stricter regulations, their brutality would only end when paid for with death. Now, juvenile offenders would be sent to military-run facilities for rehabilitation under forced detention. The duration of their education would extend indefinitely until they were deemed completely transformed, much like Chang-Su's tragic ending. Back to reality, the atmosphere at the Penguin Orphanage was more chaotic than ever, filled with police sirens and loud shouts of, "Stay back! Step back right now!" The police had cordoned off the crime scene in the dark alley. The surrounding residents whispered about a serious incident, with rumors swirling that someone had died. At the same time, the car carrying Yusong was stuck tight amidst the crowd. Hearing his driver complain about potentially being late for cram school, Yusong suddenly realized this was the very orphanage area where he used to live. With a bad premonition, he abruptly opened the car door and dashed out, ignoring the driver's attempts to stop him. Yusong's eyes showed clear, overwhelming anxiety as he looked toward the crime scene. Under the dim streetlights, a Penguin Orphanage watch lay shattered on the ground. Yusong was stunned, whispering to himself, "Don't tell me." The murmurs of the surrounding crowd pierced his heart like knives. Murder? I heard the culprit is a kid from the orphanage. How terrifying. A heavily injured corpse, covered by a white sheet, lay cold on the street. Yusong frantically pushed his way through the crowd, screaming in despair as he thought of his little brother. "My brother! What about my brother?" Yusong froze at the sight unfolding before his eyes. Citing Article 243 of the Special Juvenile Reform Act, the police announced the immediate arrest of the suspect at the scene. It was Minsu. The boy stood with his head bowed, his hands tightly handcuffed behind his back, his clothes splattered with blood. Minsu's face was lifeless, his eyes empty, bearing fresh wounds across his face. From this moment on, all personal information of this teenager would be managed by the Military Reform Center. In courtroom 303 of the Juvenile Reform Center, a sharp slam of the gavel shattered the suffocating silence. The judge, his face severe, roared in fury. "Incorrigible!" Standing in the dock with his hands tightly cuffed, Minsu quietly lowered his head, listening to the ironclad accusations. "Minsu, you have shown absolutely no signs of remorse. Do not forget that you are here on murder charges." Stripped of his usual arrogance, he could only weakly protest in despair. "I didn't kill anyone. I've said it over and over again. Why won't you listen to me?" His plea was met only with the judge's contempt. Tsk, always lying. He held up an evidence bag containing a blood-stained brick and questioned, "Then how do you explain the fingerprints and blood on this brick?" The judge's patience seemed to have reached its limit as he listed a series of Minsu's past offenses. "And what about all those other crimes you committed? Are you saying you didn't do those either?" He argued that Minsu, like many other criminals, was always looking to blame his circumstances, family, or situation to play the victim. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge seems genuinely angry. The judge continued to scold the remorseless nature of straying youths, killing over the slightest thing. "At this rate, the world will turn into a graveyard. Therefore, you need to learn your lesson now." He delivered a mocking lecture. "If someone bothers you, tell an adult so they can help. After all, the reason you committed those crimes is because you don't trust adults." Immediately after, the official sentence was declared. According to Article 28 of the Reform and Rehabilitation Act, you are hereby sentenced to detention at the Juvenile Reform Center. Minsu trudged onto the prisoner transport bus, heading toward a remote and desolate place. The teenagers on the bus started to clamor and complain. "Ha ha, damn, this center is far as hell. When are we going to get there? What is this? North Korea? Damn, there's nothing but mountains everywhere." Meanwhile, someone rudely asked, "Hey, I need to take a leak. Are there any rest stops? Hey, mister, sing us a song for fun, will ya?" A punk on the bus started messing with the escorting police officer. The officer could only force a smile and placate them. "Come on, kids, try to sit still for just a bit longer." The delinquent youths began losing their patience. One even screamed because he couldn't hold it in any longer. However, the noise was quickly silenced when an imposing arched gate leading into an isolated area appeared before them. The police officer coldly reminded them, "Just wait until you get inside. You'll have plenty of time to put on a show then." The bus pressed on deep into the remote mountains, where a massive cold structure named the Juvenile Reform Center lay waiting. The boys started getting nervous upon seeing how rundown the place looked. They couldn't believe they actually had to sleep here. Suddenly, a cheer broke through the gloomy atmosphere. "Hey, look over there, girls!" Just outside the fence, a group of female inmates were performing hard labor, shovels in hand. The boys on the bus went wild, pressing their faces against the windows, shouting crude remarks and sniffing the air perversely. Their excitement was snuffed out when the officer spoke up. "Shut it! That's a restricted area, don't even dream about it." The heavy iron gates slammed shut, officially locking them all inside a world with no escape. The moment they stepped off the bus, the youths showed their rebellious nature, constantly complaining about back pain and making absurd demands like wanting an arcade room. One of them even had the audacity to block a guard's path and demand a cigarette. Upon being refused on the grounds that minors were not allowed to smoke, he instantly became aggressive, pressing in on the police officer and threatening him. "Hey, you want to get punched before you cough it up? 1 punch, or 2, or 3, or 4? Just as the tension reached its peak, a bizarre sound suddenly echoed out. Minsu looked around in bewilderment and was stunned to witness a group of heavily muscled, bald men wearing collars like livestock, running past while making pig-like grunts, leaving everyone completely horrified. Seeing these burly men running and oinking like pigs, the rookies couldn't hold back and burst into mocking laughter. They pointed and sneered, "What a bunch of freaks. What kind of training has them oinking like that?" However, the mocking atmosphere instantly froze when an officer shouted, ordering everyone to stand at attention. Heavy footsteps approached, making the crowd anxious, unsure of what was happening. As soon as the platoon command rang out, the jogging, muscular men stopped immediately, standing in a straight, mechanical formation. Strange characters were tattooed on their chests, and iron collars rested on their necks like cattle. Upon the warden's command, the entire platoon simultaneously let out a bizarre grunt as a sign of respectful greeting. The sight of dozens of massive men obeying blindly left the newly arrived youths utterly dumbfounded. A man with a commanding presence and sharp, piercing eyes stepped forward. He was the one in charge of this place. Seeing him, the unruly youths remained unafraid, continuing their sarcastic remarks, dismissing this military charade as lame and annoying. The warden wasn't angry. He simply smirked with a sinister grin and coldly ordered everyone to bow down. The rookies continued to laugh naively, challenging to see what this old man was planning to do. But in a split second, the absolute authority of this place was firmly asserted. The entire platoon of veteran inmates dropped to the ground simultaneously, creating a terrifyingly submissive scene. The teenagers started to feel uneasy. "Don't worry, we still have children's rights. What's there to be afraid of?" The warden pointed straight at them and declared with a growl that another batch of bugs had come looking for death today. "You have 10 minutes. Turn those bugs into livestock," the warden ordered coldly. Instantly, the hulking inmates responded in unison with their bizarre grunts. A furious rookie screamed out, insulting the warden as a despicable old man and threatening to snap his neck, talking big as the fastest way to die. However, before his challenge even finished, a powerful hand punched him squarely in the face with tremendous force. Witnessing that scene, Minsu could only stand frozen in his tracks, completely shell-shocked. The real nightmare began when that beast-like pack of men launched a frantic attack. Those who had been so arrogant just moments before were now screaming in despair, begging the monsters to stay away. A fellow inmate was kicked away. The sound of impact and agonizing screams echoed throughout the courtyard. The warden stood there, smiling triumphantly, declaring that from now on none of them were human anymore, only loyal slaves. When he finally permitted them to speak in human language, the older inmates prostrated themselves simultaneously, screaming their thanks and absolute submission, much to the terror of the newcomers. Amidst the chaos, Minsu chose to lie completely still on the ground, playing dead in hopes of escaping the sight of these demons. While lying low and observing, Minsu realized the situation was worse than ever, as the rookies were being hunted like prey. A poor teenager ran toward the security personnel, desperately pleading for help. But the response to his plea was the face of a young officer sporting a grotesquely wide, ear-to-ear smile. He waved him off while mockingly warning him not to come closer. Minsu shuddered, realizing something was deeply wrong. If he had wanted to help, he would have intervened long ago. The moment the boy reached him, the officer swung a powerful strike that knocked the victim out instantly, followed by a maniacal roar. "I told you not to come over here!" the officer shrieked as he wildly swung his baton at the rookies. With a furious, wide-eyed glare, he added, "Anyone who acts up gets a taste of this stick immediately." The harsh sound of baton strikes mingled with the pitiful begging of those beaten to the ground. "I'm sorry. Sob, please, don't hit me anymore. I'm sorry." Watching motionlessly, Minsu deduced that this was actually an intimidation tactic for survival. He noticed they were controlling their strength very carefully. Although their movements were exaggerated, they never aimed for vital spots. Minsu told himself, "This isn't violence meant to kill, makes sense? Most people don't want to be murderers, neither do I." However, Minsu's quick wit caught the eye of a powerful officer. He leaned close to Minsu's face and smirked meaningfully. "Oh, quite the actor, aren't you, kid?" As Minsu stammered, trying to apologize, the officer casually cut him off and suddenly stomped hard on his head. He growled a threat. "I really like clever little rats like you. All right, from now on, you're a rat. You better make sure to keep me entertained. Got it?" Under the heavy boot, Minsu could only let out a groan of pain, but the officer immediately corrected him. "Not it's squeak. Squeak for me." "Sir, Warden, all the new recruits have stripped." The officers reported clearly, standing before a long line of shivering, half-naked teenagers. The rookies stood frozen, their faces pale with shock and humiliation. Witnessing the scene, the warden flashed a cruel smile, exposing his gleaming white teeth. He coldly announced, "All right, the evaluation begins now." Meanwhile, at a quiet apartment complex around 2 p.m., a man in a sharp suit silently appeared in front of an apartment door. He rang the doorbell and called out softly, "Hello, is anybody home?" After confirming there was no answer, he casually jiggled the doorknob and thought to himself that this was the perfect time for someone to be out. Suddenly, he pulled a pair of sharp scissors from his suit pocket. With a highly professional and decisive motion, he used the scissors to snip the security seal on the door and broke inside, an uninvited guest, casually opening the door for a quick visit. Yusung stepped into the dark room with a piercing gaze. Childhood memories flooded back, times when he and his brother frequently broke into empty houses. Back then, Minsu would stand guard outside while he was responsible for stealing the valuables inside. They had lived like professional thieves for years until the police finally caught them and sent them to the orphanage. It only took 5 minutes for the two brothers to completely clear out a house. Yusung thought those dark days were behind him, but here he was, once again breaking into someone else's home. He looked coldly at the person lying on the bed and reassured him, "Don't worry, I'm not here to steal anything. I just want answers. My little brother was also sent there." The person on the bed was none other than Chang-Su. But now he was nothing more than a soulless husk, mouth agape, muttering incessantly. Yuzong wondered in disbelief what kind of hellhole that reform center must be to turn a guy like him into such a state. Although the report claimed he suffered a head injury from a high fall, Yusong noticed there were no signs of trauma or broken bones on his body at all. He couldn't fathom what could have turned such a fierce, arrogant school boss into this broken shell of a person. Seeing the current Chang-Su whimpering and crying over soiling his pants, Yusong completely lost his patience. He roughly grabbed Chang-Su by the face, roaring in a fury, "You were only in there for 4 weeks. But my brother might never get out, so snap out of it and answer me." In a state of sheer panic, Chang-Su began screaming wildly about being electrocuted, begging desperately, "It hurts! It hurts! I was wrong!" Yusong realized that interrogating Chang-Su was likely useless, as he just kept screaming in terror about electric shocks. However, upon closer inspection, he was stunned to discover strange red burn scars on Chang-Su's chest. Meanwhile, back at the Reform Center, a ruthless sorting process was underway. Stencils were pressed against the rookies' chests, and red paint was sprayed over them to brand their ranks based on the severity of their crimes. Dozens of teenagers were forced to kneel in humiliation, bearing glowing red symbols branded onto their naked bodies. Sitting in a lounge chair in the middle of the courtyard, the warden casually flipped through their files. He muttered names like Oh Sang-jin and Park San-woo. They were all classified as C rank for petty theft or vandalism. He looked visibly disappointed. "How boring. Just a bunch of thieves. Where's the thrill?" However, his gaze suddenly locked onto a familiar face. He smugly confirmed that his eyes hadn't deceived him when he spotted a truly interesting kid. A streak of red paint was sprayed onto Minsu's chest. The warden cheered with sheer excitement. "Congratulations, little rat. It's you, Minsu. What a surprise." Minsu started to speak, but immediately caught himself and squeaked like a rat, per the rules. The warden chuckled in amusement, stating that Minsu was much more violent than he looked, as he admired the bright red A stamped on the boy's chest. Minsu was the only A rank in this batch of rookies. His face was a picture of absolute shock as he heard the warden's promise. "Welcome to paradise. You'll be taken very good care of here." His file clearly stated, Minsu, 18 years old. Crime, murder. Classification, rank A. Over at Ianji Girls High School, the appearance of a stranger was causing a stir among the female students. One girl hastily urged her friend to stop eating and look across the street. There stood a neatly dressed young man leaning against a bicycle, engrossed in a book by Rimbaud. His romantic, handsome charm made the schoolgirls swoon. "He's gorgeous." Seizing the opportunity, two girls eagerly approached him, pretending they had met him before to strike up a conversation. They weren't shy about expressing their desire to be friends right away. One girl even mistook him for an idol trainee and boldly asked for his social media handle. Yusong gently pushed up his glasses. "I'm a bit of a caveman. I only use carrier pigeons to send messages." This reply only made the girls more excited. They thought a guy who didn't use social media was incredibly cool and adorable. Capitalizing on their attention, Yusong got straight to the point. "By the way, can I ask you something? I'm looking for someone. A girl named Semin." The moment they heard that name, the two girls' expressions changed instantly, and one of them pointed across the way. "Semin? Why even mention that monster's name? It's bad luck for the whole day." Just then, a girl with messy, long black hair appeared, casually wearing an unbuttoned dress shirt and holding a motorcycle helmet. She nonchalantly blew a bubblegum bubble with a complete look of indifference. The students around began whispering about how she had just returned from the reform center, warning each other that she was extremely dangerous. Despite the warnings, Yusheng stood his ground, his eyes locked on his target. The two girls with him started to panic, afraid of getting dragged into trouble. Without a shred of hesitation, Yusong walked straight up to the edgy girl. Semin spoke coldly. "What do you want?" Yusong looked her straight in the eye and demanded, "I want to know about the reform center." However, Semin didn't care in the slightest. She just muttered, "Get lost," and casually brushed past his shoulder. Yusong stood frozen, softly saying, "My little brother is in there," as he watched Semin's retreating back. He sighed, blaming himself for being too blunt, and resolved to find another way to approach her next time. But suddenly a helmet was tossed straight at him. Catching it with quick reflexes, Yusong looked bewildered at Semin, who was now seated on a bright red heavy-duty motorcycle. She commanded coldly, "Get on! Are you just going to stand there modeling for those schoolgirls?" The engine roared as they sped away down the long, empty highway. Yusong wondered why she had suddenly changed her mind, but the only reason he risked everything was still, "My little brother is locked up in there too." Wind whipped fiercely against his visor as Yusong pressed her anxiously. What kind of place is the Juvenile Reform Center, really? After a haunting silence, Semin dropped just one chilling word, "Hell." Back in that hell on earth, the warden roared with excitement in front of the line of exhausted inmates. "It's only been 3 hours!" He proceeded to order the start of the next exercise, leaving Minsu gritting his teeth in extreme fatigue, drenched in sweat. He desperately wondered when this torture would ever end. "Start frog jumping!" The warden's harsh voice barked out, forcing Minsu to squeak like a rat to match his assigned identity. In the scorching courtyard, Minsu and his fellow inmates had to jump continuously, endlessly chanting "pig oink," while pitiful squeaks echoed non-stop. "Damn it, it's already been 3 hours! When will this end?" Minsu gritted his teeth, dripping with sweat after hours of continuous torment. High above, the warden hummed casually, enjoying the cries of his livestock, finding the sound incredibly sweet. Suddenly, an inmate collapsed from exhaustion. Instead of receiving help, a guard kicked him hard and yelled, "Don't be lazy, get up!" Someone broke formation, so we're starting all over again. The poor guy could only beg to use the restroom, as his stomach pain had surpassed the limit of his endurance. The guards rushed in to beat the helpless kid, mocking how tough he acted when he first arrived, only to fold so easily now. Just then, the head warden unexpectedly stepped in to stop them, remarking that beating someone just for needing the bathroom was too harsh. He gently helped the beaten boy up, consoling him that he must have held it in for a long time before finally speaking up. The warden stepped closer, calmly asking the crowd, Does anyone else need to use the restroom? This unexpected question made Minsu instantly suspicious. Immediately, a chorus of me too, echoed from the exhausted inmates. Minsu wondered if this was a trap to separate them and beat them individually. The guard roared, ordering everyone to line up single file without speaking a word of human language. The warden continued his offer, confirming, "If you don't go now, you'll have to hold it until tonight." He watched as the eager inmates formed a line. Minsu felt this was highly suspicious. He reasoned that with such an atrocious system in place, there was no way they'd be lenient enough to let everyone fake stomach aches just for a break. The warden kept pitching it as a rare opportunity to get in line. Minsu looked at the craving eyes around him and warned himself. Unconditional kindness is like an unknown fruit in the wild. The more delicious and tempting it looks, the more careful you must be. Deciding to test his luck, he raised his hand and let out a squeak, requesting to join the line. However, the moment the guard approached, Minsu abruptly changed his tune. He shouted in human language that he didn't need the restroom anymore and would return to training immediately. The officer exploded in rage. He grabbed Minsu firmly and yelled furiously, "Are you messing with me? Do we look like we're playing around?" Minsu explained through the pain that extreme muscle exertion caused a sudden stomach cramp, but he was only met with a cruel threat. "Stomach ache? Let me help you clear it all out." He could only cower and beg in despair. "I'm sorry!" The guard roughly tossed Minsu back into the formation and roared, "Get back in line, you little rat! I'll be keeping an eye on you!" He tumbled to the ground in humiliation, surrounded by the mocking laughter of his peers. "What is that idiot doing? Ha ha!" Wiping his sweat, he silently recognized the anomaly. "They treat us like animals but give us bathroom breaks. Only humans need restrooms. This is definitely a trap." The officer gathered all those wanting to use the restroom into one spot and clearly announced, "Everyone who needs the bathroom is right here." The warden approached with a wicked grin. He casually bestowed his favor. "Of course, man or beast, everyone needs to relieve themselves. You guys look like you're struggling. I'll grant you 30 minutes. Go quickly before you miss your ride." Those left behind watched with envy, secretly regretting that they weren't fast enough to join and get a break. The clever ones who stayed began to mock the fools who fell for the bathroom trick, but their smiles were instantly wiped out when the warden pointed at them and roared, "What are you laughing at? You guys are excused, not them." The remaining teenagers froze in utter horror, realizing they were the actual targets. The warden stood from his high vantage point and coldly announced a bizarre new punishment. "From now on, you are going to be a human centipede." Immediately, they were forced into a humiliating position. The person behind rested their legs on the shoulders of the person in front, face pressed right against their backside, forming a long chain just like a centipede. The guards yelled, forcing everyone to hold themselves up with straight arms. If one person dropped, the entire group had to start over. Minsu bitterly realized that they were now worse off than actual insects. The true nightmare set in when the guard barked a demeaning insult. "You lot are worse than farm pigs. You're so lowly you can't even control your basic bodily functions." He maniacally forced the ones with stomach aches to relieve themselves right then and there while in the centipede formation. "For trash like you, using a toilet is a luxury. You useless bugs." The warden laughed heartily at the inmates' suffering. He stomped around, sadistically urging them on. "Your mobile toilets are right here, use them quickly." A teenager collapsed, bursting into tears of utter shame and humiliation as the final boundaries of human dignity were mercilessly trampled. "What are you staring at with those dead eyes?" The shouts mixed with continuous kicks raining down on the exhausted youths. It had only been 3 hours, but the arrogant pride of these wild beasts upon their arrival had completely vanished. Instead, they were blasted with high-pressure water hoses to wash them down, treated exactly like livestock. And those lucky enough to escape punishment realized one fundamental truth. In this place, the head warden's word was absolute law. The PA system blared across the camp, signaling break time. "All right, clean up and get inside. It's time to serve the pet buffet." Instantly, the guards shouted their compliance in unison. Then they escorted the inmates toward the Reform Center's cafeteria. Holding his food tray, Minsu was appalled to see the meager rations. There was only a scoop of white rice and some plain broth. He muttered bitterly, "There's nothing to even eat here." The humiliation peaked when he realized they all had to sit on the floor to eat. Minsu bitterly wondered why they didn't even have basic utensils. Was it because, in the eyes of their captors, they were truly just livestock and nothing more? Just then, an officer stood in front and clearly announced, "Everyone, let's sing the gratitude song together." The veteran inmates began screaming the grotesque lyrics. "We are not human. We are dogs. We are pigs. We eat what we are given. We do what we are told," they yelled frantically, giving thanks for being insulted and beaten. Minsu froze in absolute disgust. He recognized the horrific inhumanity unfolding right before his eyes. Framed ceremoniously on the wall, the gratitude song featured lyrics stating they would not bark, not bite, and only obey orders. The ultimate collection of the most well-behaved pigs on the planet. Minsu's gaze turned sharp and cold as he saw through the truth that they were being treated entirely as livestock. He gritted his teeth, his hand gripping the lump of rice, and vowed to himself that whether he was livestock or anything else, he would survive this hell. Stuffing the plain rice into his mouth, Minsu promised his inner self that he would endure it all. His eyes burned with iron will, determined to overcome every humiliation to escape this hellish place at any cost. Meanwhile, on a high cliff overlooking the valley, Yusong stood silently gazing at the juvenile reform center as it faded into the twilight. Samin sat casually on the railing, her distant eyes fixed on the cell blocks. She admitted that she came here every day because she couldn't stop worrying about her little brother, who was awaiting trial and would likely end up there soon. When Yusong asked if it was truly hell, Samin replied coldly that hell might actually be better, for that place was simply not meant for human beings. The horrifying memories gave her nightmares every night, and she had to rely on sleeping pills just to catch a wink. Seeing Yusong's unwavering resolve, she understood just how deeply he worried about his brother. Yusong bitterly revealed that it was his late mother's final wish. She had asked him to protect his brother, but in the end, he had failed. That was precisely why Yusong sought out Samin, hoping he could still do something before it was too late. Because among the rare few who had escaped that place, she was the only one who still seemed stable. Samin suddenly asked if he wanted to know the secret to how she survived her time at the reform center. Yusong eagerly pressed her for the method to get out of there in one piece. But Samin's answer left him utterly dumbfounded. She twisted her face into a distorted expression, sticking her tongue out grotesquely, and declared, "Wanna live? Just act like an idiot like this. Guaranteed you'll survive." Seeing Yusong still doubting her, she emphasized that she was telling the absolute truth. Yusong suddenly grew angry, growling that he wasn't joking around and demanding she be serious and tell him the real truth. Samin simply fell silent. She turned her back to him and softly murmured that she wasn't joking. Her hand slowly reached up to her head, brushing her thick hair aside. Yusong was so stunned he couldn't speak when he saw the horrifying truth hidden beneath. Covering Samin's scalp were lumpy, crisscrossing, and deformed scars. She explained that with just the slightest flare-up, they were ready to attack each other without a second thought. That place was so full of lunatics that she never imagined she'd have to witness atrocities like someone being brutally tortured with boiling oil. Seeing Yusong bow his head in apology for what she had been through, Samin brushed it off and told him to say no more. She admitted she got out early simply by pretending to be retarded, a seemingly simple trick that was actually the key to survival. But she also reminded him that this method might not help much with his brother's situation. Noting Yusong's lingering, sorrowful expression, she kicked out her leg playfully, warning him to drop the pity party if he didn't want her to beat him up. Yusong gave a faint smile in return, then told her to put her leg down. He turned and asked about the strange marks he had seen. Samin explained that after the induction ceremony for both boys and girls at the center, the inmates would be bathed, issued a uniform, and given a meal. However, to prevent any escape attempts, everyone was forced to wear a GPS tracking collar. In the detention area, Minsu awkwardly put on his baggy clothes. His hand unconsciously touched the pitch-black collar tightening around his neck, completely unaware of its true function. "Don't dawdle! Walk in a straight line!" A guard's shout cut through Minsu's thoughts. He trudged along in formation, his mouth still forced to chant those humiliating pig oink sounds. Samin explained that after receiving their gear, the inmates were escorted to designated rooms. This assignment was based entirely on the severity of their crimes. For example, Room E was for basic assault, Room D for drug dealing, and Room C for thieves and fraudsters. Due to aggravated assault, Samin had been thrown into Room B. A heavy iron door swung open, revealing a dark, oppressive space. Semin emphasized that Room A was where the most dangerous criminals were held, those charged with murder or equivalent crimes. Stepping inside with a food tray in his hands, Minsu froze at the sight of his cellmates, men with deformed, terrifying appearances. He broke into a cold sweat, realizing he had just walked into a tiger's den, filled with cold-blooded killers just like the crime he was accused of. His eyes remained locked on the group of inmates waiting there. Among them was Sejun, with long hair obscuring half his face, sitting quietly in the corner. The others, one picking his nose, another cracking his knuckles aggressively, exuded an invisible pressure that made Minsu sweat even more. He thought to himself, "It's too quiet. Is this a showdown? I absolutely cannot back down." The silence was shattered when the guy with the lumpy, scarred head growled ferociously, "You bastard! Don't you know how to introduce yourself?" The guy next to him chimed in, cracking his knuckles as he interrogated, "Where are you from? What brought you here?" Minsu maintained his composure and replied, "I'm from the Penguin Orphanage and I used to go to Seonggrak High School." Upon hearing that, the entire group erupted into arrogant laughter. They mocked him. From an orphanage to a prison camp, quite the standard career path. Amidst the uproar, Sejun suddenly spoke up, cutting them off. "Shut up, all of you." The leader stared straight at Minsu with sharp eyes and asked coldly, "What crime did you come here for?" "If you're in Room A, you must have done something incredibly horrific." Minsu looked at the leader and nonchalantly dropped a single word, "Murder." The moment that word left his lips, the atmosphere in the room froze solid. Those who had just been laughing were now wide-eyed, their faces betraying absolute terror. Was a real killer finally among them? Or was he just talking big for clout? Noticing his cellmates' exaggerated reactions, Minsu lowered his head and questioned himself. Why would I lie about something that's bound to come out anyway? But wait, could he be the only murderer in this place? Minsu looked around the cell, secretly wondering if the severity of a crime truly determined one's power here. If murder was the worst crime, he should be the most feared one here. Yet, the reality was entirely the opposite. A short-haired inmate turned and sneered at the guy acting as Sejun's human chair. "Guess who's gonna be stuck as the permanent rookie?" It was a white-haired guy named Poppy. Minsu went numb, realizing that the guy being trampled underfoot was actually the true bottom feeder, the lowest of the low in the room. Sejun suddenly stood up, causing a terrified Poppy to profusely apologize. In a flash, a devastating kick struck the white-haired guy for daring to speak human language. "You're at it again? Daring to speak human language? Damn you!" Poor Poppy could only let out pathetic squeaks to beg for forgiveness. Minsu bitterly realized that whether on the inside or outside, the weak were always bullied. If they wanted to see him as a murderer, he would embrace that ruthless persona just to survive. 7 p.m., reflection time began. According to the rules, every youth at the Reform Center had to write 10 letters of reflection every day. Minsu sat blankly in front of a white page, clutching his pencil in frustration. He cursed inwardly. "Damn it! I didn't even kill anyone. What am I supposed to write?" While wrestling with his tangled thoughts, a crumpled ball of paper suddenly flew over and smacked right onto his desk. Behind him, his cellmates were loudly playing baseball with wads of paper and makeshift bats. They argued noisily over fouls and saves, completely ignoring their study time. Annoyed, Minsu told them to shut up and asked if they didn't have to write their own letters of reflection. The delinquents roared with arrogant laughter, questioning why they should even bother with such trash. One guy jerked his chin toward Poppy, who was hunched over writing amid a towering mountain of papers. "Poppy is the national secretary of this room." Poppy suddenly stood up amidst the pile of papers, irritating his cellmates. "What is it, Poppy? Why are you standing before you're done writing?" He could only bark humiliatingly in place of speech. When forced to speak human language to explain, Poppy mumbled a request to use the restroom, but was immediately scolded for daring to forget his identity as a rat. The leader chuckled and gave him permission to go relieve himself. Minsu watched quietly, bitterly realizing that in this place, human rights were a luxury. The wardens viewed the inmates as nothing but livestock. In the hidden corners free from surveillance, the law of the jungle reigned absolute. Even while trying to use the restroom, Poppy was brutally attacked. "How dare you squat like a human?" A devastating kick sent him tumbling, leaving him groaning in extreme agony. Here, the weak were simply prey, and absolutely no one would stand up to protect them. To survive, you had to become strong, or at the very least, pretend to be. The humiliation reached its peak when Poppy was forced to relieve himself exactly like a real dog. The other inmates stood outside howling with laughter, delighted by the disgusting spectacle and treating it as cheap entertainment. 8:00 p.m. Bath time began in a cramped, tension-filled space. Everyone had exactly 3 minutes to wash themselves using a tiny sliver of soap that had passed through countless hands. Minsu worried he'd catch a disease having to share hygiene products with 50 other people in these wretched conditions. 9:00 p.m. Pre-bedtime roll call officially began under the strict supervision of the guards. The clear shouts of the inmates rang out in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. However, when it was his turn, instead of calling out the next number, Poppy suddenly barked. Here was the ultimate party crasher during roll call. Minsu's eyes widened in sheer shock at Poppy's sudden outburst. Immediately, the cold-blooded officer smashed the roll call log right into his face. Poppy tumbled to the ground, only able to let out pitiful, agonizing cries. After the final roll call concluded, exactly at 10 p.m., all the lights in the cell block went out. The entire room plunged into darkness. Everyone lay packed tightly together on narrow mattresses to end a long, horrifying day. Amidst the quiet, Poppy's sobbing echoed again. He muttered painfully, calling out, "Mom, I want to go home. It's all animals here." A harsh voice suddenly roared, shattering the atmosphere. "Who the hell is crying like a human over there?" Poppy hastily covered his mouth, suppressing his cries so he wouldn't be punished further. The first night at the Reform Center dragged on heavily just like that. Exactly at 5:30 a.m., everyone was roused from sleep to begin cleaning and morning roll call. The teenagers bustled about, folding blankets and scrubbing floors mechanically. A new day in this hellhole always began very early, when everyone's emotions had already grown numb. By 6:01 a.m., the clattering of carts echoed along with the staff's shouts, "Food for the rooms is here!" Food's here. The meager food trays were shoved through a small slot at the bottom of the cell door. As he chewed the dry rice, Minsu wondered aloud, "Why aren't we eating in the cafeteria?" A cellmate explained that because there was outdoor training in the afternoon, they all had to eat in the room. He looked at the tray and clicked his tongue. Getting a spoon makes it feel pretty fancy already. Mid-bite, Minsu noticed something was off and asked, "Where's Poppy? Why isn't he eating?" The cellmates casually pointed down. "He's right down there." Minsu was stunned to see Poppy crawling on the floor, carrying a wooden board on his back to act as a dining table for the others. A bully roared when a soup bowl tilted. "Damn it, the soup spilled! Aren't you paying attention?" Poppy could only cry and let out pitiful barks to apologize. Seeing Minsu's worried expression, they guffawed and asked why he cared. They claimed they were taking care of Poppy like a friend, boasting that nowhere else could you find friends who personally prepared meals like this. Minsu grew suspicious of this personally prepared meal. Right then, one guy dumped all the leftover food and bones onto a single plate and mixed it all together. He smugly declared, "Premium garbage specialty is served. Dig in." Minsu froze, unable to believe the cruelty of these monsters. The bullies continued to mock, saying it was the perfect meal because it left no waste, and asked Poppy if looking at it made him drool. Sweating profusely, seeing him hesitate, the leader shrieked, "Poppy, why aren't you eating?" In absolute terror, Poppy lowered his head and began licking the pile of garbage right off the floor. Unable to bear it any longer, Minsu spoke up coldly, "Hey, don't eat that." He decisively launched a powerful kick, knocking the board off Poppy's back and sending the food trays and scraps flying everywhere. This sudden action made the cellmates' expressions change simultaneously as they roared in anger. Minsu looked straight at Poppy and pressed him, "Are you really just a kid?" The poor teenager, bearing the name tag Moon Hyun Jun, looked up at Minsu with terrified eyes amidst the mess. Just then, Sejun suddenly called out, "Hey, murderer!" He growled, asserting that this place had its own hierarchy and rules. If Minsu was a newcomer, he absolutely had to obey them. Sejun glared at Minsu with sharp eyes and laid it down. "If you don't like it, come at me. Beat me." He coldly added that to do so, Minsu first had to defeat Poppy, since the boy technically outranked him. He threw in a threatening caveat. If Minsu lost, he would have to take the spot and become the new Poppy of the room. Minsu sighed in complete exasperation, feeling that this ranking game was incredibly childish and ridiculous. He thought contemptuously that even though they were locked up for causing trouble, these guys still couldn't shed their cheap thug nature. Suddenly, Moon Hyunjun lunged at Minsu, attacking him with a flurry of punches. Witnessing this, the surrounding cellmates screamed in excitement, cheering him on. "Punch him, Poppy! Being the youngest forever is boring!" They laughed gleefully, not expecting a weak-looking kid to have such guts. Constant jeers rang out, challenging the murderer Minsu to fight back if he didn't want to be trampled to the very bottom of their society. Minsu gritted his teeth and took the blows, realizing the ironic truth. Poppy was sobbing and continuously apologizing even as he threw punches. He asked himself helplessly how he could strike back at someone who was crying while attacking him. The scene briefly shifted to a peaceful moment at the Penguin Orphanage. Inside a familiar room, the orphanage director was kindly asking Yuseong about packing his bags as he was heading off to the military the next day. Yuseong sat quietly on the floor, tightly hugging a penguin-shaped pillow, and confirmed he had finished packing, keeping the priceless mementos of the two brothers close. The director smiled, reminiscing about the past. She called them the dynamic duo who used to wreck the whole neighborhood. She specifically mentioned Yuseong, who used to terrify the local kids so much they wouldn't dare come near, since he often beat them to a pulp. Yuseong just chuckled softly, asking, "Did I really do that?" Then his eyes turned sharp and dangerous. He smirked at the director and stated that she might have misunderstood something. "It's true I fought those kids, but I wasn't actually the one they were most afraid of." Back in the cell, Moon Hyunjun was crying while frantically raining blows down on Minsu. "I'm sorry, but I don't want to be Poppy anymore." Minsu could only shield his head and endure the beating helplessly. Witnessing this, the scarred inmate sneered with utter contempt. He mocked that Minsu's murderer title was nothing but empty talk, calling him weak. He roughly grabbed Minsu, hurling insults about him being abandoned by his parents, and declared that Minsu was just trash, the new Poppy of the room. But Yuseong knew the absolute truth. The one those kids truly feared back then wasn't him. It was his little brother, Minsu. Just as his fury reached its boiling point, Minsu suddenly unleashed a lightning-fast uppercut that sent the scarred guy flying backward. Yuseong admitted that while he might be better at martial arts, when Minsu lost control, things got extremely ugly. The flash-like strike left Moon Hyunjun and the cellmates paralyzed with fear. Even Sejun's expression changed, his eyes clearly showing wariness toward the explosive power of the one he had just looked down upon. Minsu stood tall in the center of the room, radiating a chilling, terrifying aura. Yuseong bitterly acknowledged that once his little brother truly snapped, absolutely no one could stop him. Minsu charged forward in a frenzied attack. "Poppy, you're all going to become Poppy!" His powerful punch caught his opponent completely off guard. Glaring murderously, he growled, "I told you I'd turn you all into that." However, Minsu alone couldn't take on the entire room, and he was struck down, sprawling on the floor. The cellmates sneered, "Damn it, what a mess." They surrounded him, mocking, "Turn us into Poppy? Are you insane?" Another added, "You only got one life and you think you can rule the room?" The delinquents continued their insults, claiming this place had no shortage of show-offs. "Do we look like a joke to you?" One guy stepped closer, insulting Minsu as an abandoned orphan. Striking a nerve, Minsu roared, "Shut your mouth!" He lunged frantically, brutally shoving a toilet brush straight into the mouth of the guy who insulted him. "Dare to bring up my mother? Eat this brush." The situation descended into pure chaos as the rest of the mob rushed in. "This little punk! Shove the toilet brush in his mouth!" But then they suddenly stopped dead in their tracks, not daring to advance even an inch. Minsu's eyes suddenly went blank and terrifying. His hand tightly gripped the toilet brush. Its handle snapped to form a sharp shank. He rasped, "Kill me? Have any of you ever actually killed someone?" The scene shifted elsewhere. A scarred man with a vicious gaze roared decisively, "I will abolish the Juvenile Act. If words don't work, we must resort to force." He glared at a golf ball as if it were an enemy, then swung the club for a powerful drive, venting his anger at some nameless rival who dared take his spot. His cronies standing around clapped endlessly in applause. "Beautiful shot. Congressman, what a decisive swing." But inwardly, he was still seething. He secretly wished he could crush his opponent, Han Man-soo, just as easily. Turning to Yusong, who was kneeling submissively on the ground, the congressman spoke coldly. Anyway, why are you just standing there? Yusong maintained his kneeling posture and clearly stated his intent. I'm considering enlisting early. Tackling juvenile issues right now will surely benefit your political career, father. Hearing this, the congressman tightened his gloves and smirked, mocking Yusong's fake filial piety. He exposed him. You wouldn't study medicine and now you're playing night detective? The congressman took another terrifyingly powerful swing and yelled, Speak honestly, Yusong, isn't all this actually for your little brother? He coldly asserted that even if Yusong enlisted right now, there was zero guarantee he'd be deployed to the exact juvenile reform center where his brother was. Yusong bowed his head low, pleading earnestly, I understand that. That's why I'm begging for your help, father. If anyone can make it happen, it's only you. But the powerful father simply turned his back and walked away, dropping a heartless question. Why should I clean up the mess your brother made? Watching the emotionless back of that man, Yusong's eyes darkened with gloom behind his glasses. He bitterly realized that, in the end, this father would never lift a finger to help him. Give and take. The congressman looked at Yusong calculatingly and laid down an absolute condition. Can you help your father become president? Yusong froze, stunned and unable to believe his ears, but his powerful father had already decisively turned away, urging him to begin the campaign to push him to the peak of power if he wanted to save his brother. Back in the cell, the tension had reached its boiling point. Come on! Bring it on, all of you! Minsu was in a frenzy, his face bloodied, gripping the sharpened broom handle like a knife. But before he could make a move, a burly guy suddenly closed in from behind, restraining him tightly and taking him completely by surprise. Take this, you bastard! A punch slammed straight into Minsu's head, while the guy behind him refused to loosen his grip. The cellmates started panicking when they saw Minsu lying motionless. They trembled, wondering, is he really dead? Killing someone in here means we're all screwed. However, Minsu suddenly snapped awake with a razor-sharp glare. Seizing the opening, Minsu delivered a vicious kick straight to the burly guy's groin, dropping him instantly amid a scream of agony. Just then, Sejun casually stepped up, looking down at Minsu with venomous sarcasm. Is your trigger word mother? Or is it the fact that you were abandoned that makes you so crazy? Sejun continued rubbing salt into Minsu's wounds with a mocking tone. So heartbreaking. Does your mom know? That the son she abandoned has become a murderer who can't even control his temper. Minsu lunged to attack, but was easily countered as Sejun locked his arm tight. He growled a threat. Apologize for that unless you want to lose your eyes. Sejun maintained his cold demeanor, continuing to insult his past. For what? Because your mom dumped you, or because you committed murder? Suddenly he let go and gestured. Enough. Stop right there, you bastard. While Minsu was still baffled, Sejun turned his back, raised his hands in surrender, and pinned all the blame on him. There, it's all his fault. I was just passing by. Minsu stared in shock. What? Who are you talking to? Instantly, guards swarmed into the cell, screaming furiously. You bastard, do you know where you are? All the inmates in the room were forced against the wall, while the guards confiscated the broom handle from Minsu and applied physical disciplinary measures on him. They rained non-stop blows on his body. You little punk! Causing trouble the moment you arrive? Minsu could only groan in agony. The officer coldly noted in the report about Minsu's act of attacking fellow inmates with a weapon. When questioned, both Sejun and Moon Hyun-jun unanimously agreed. That's right, he orchestrated the whole thing. We're completely innocent. Minsu was dragged away, heavily injured and deemed beyond saving. 15 days of vacation in solitary confinement, plenty of time to ponder your life. Lying curled up on the freezing floor with his hands bound tight, Minsu could only grit his teeth and curse silently in sheer helplessness. Solitary confinement, also known as the punishment room, is where troublemakers are completely isolated for a set period. Even more terrifying, the days spent locked up here do not count toward the total sentence. Minsu muttered bitterly, Damn it! I just uselessly extended my sentence. Yet, the feeling of being alone in this quiet space actually made him feel quite comfortable. Minsu even wished he had caused trouble earlier so he could be brought here sooner. The brief peace was shattered by a guard's shout through the door slot. Lee Min-soo, sit up straight. If you keep lying there, you'll be locked up for another day. Instantly, Min-soo was forced into a painful kneeling position. Kneel down and drop that attitude. In this punishment room, inmates were required to maintain a kneeling posture until bedtime, under strict 24/7 camera surveillance. Even the most basic freedom to move their limbs was completely stripped away. A rare minor comfort was that the restraints would be loosened when the inmate used the restroom. However, just as he settled onto the toilet, Min-soo was horrified to realize a glaring omission. Wait, where's the toilet paper? Hearing the noise, the guard outside snapped, "There's no toilet paper here." He casually instructed, "It's right behind you. Look back." Min-soo looked back in confusion, but saw no sign of a paper roll. There was only a cold, dripping faucet. The guard's voice rang out decisively again. "Use the tap water to wash yourself." He looked down at his own hands and screamed in horror. "With my hands?" A plain meal tray with dried fish and some bland broth was slid in, but for Min-soo, eating right now felt like sheer torture. His hands bound tightly behind his back forced him to bend over, scavenging the food with his mouth like an animal. He screamed internally in rage. "Damn it! At least untie my hands when I eat." His anger flared with every hasty swallow. Min-soo gritted his teeth and swore a venomous oath. "I've etched your names into my grudge book. You better watch out when I get out." At 7 p.m., reflection writing time began. Even in solitary confinement, Min-soo couldn't escape the blank pages. He wrote while seething, "I didn't even do anything wrong. Yet now I have to write double just because I got tossed into this solitary hole." To kill time and reassess the situation, Min-soo started drawing caricatures and analyzing his cellmates from room A, from the mocking scarred guy and the tall hulking glutton, all the way to the spineless Poppy. They all emerged with contemptuous evaluations under his pencil. He told himself that everyone here had issues, but the biggest problem was someone else entirely. Min-soo's gaze turned icy cold as it landed on the name Sejun. "I drew you the ugliest out of the bunch." Though he recognized Sejun was an incredibly skilled fighter, his will for revenge overpowered any sense of caution. As night fell, the solitary cell grew terrifyingly silent. Min-soo lay sprawled on the floor, sinking into an exhausted sleep with his hands still bound tight and the collar digging into his flesh. In a hazy dream, horrific memories from the past suddenly came rushing back. The image of the two brothers, Yusung and Min-soo, as children, standing silently in their pajamas in the dead of night. Before their eyes, a house was being utterly consumed by raging flames. The bright red fire illuminated the pale, haunted faces of the two children. Suddenly, Min-soo jolted awake in the middle of the night. He shot up, panting agonizingly with wide, terrified eyes. A frantic scream echoed through the dark room as the phantom of that long-ago fire returned once more to suffocate his mind. "Damn it!" Min-soo panted, drenched in sweat while still bound tight. Perhaps it was this harsh environment causing those horrific memories to continuously plague his dreams. He gasped in fear, feeling that if he accidentally fell asleep, that nightmare would strike again. Ultimately, Min-soo was forced to spend a long, sleepless night in extreme exhaustion. After 15 agonizingly long days in solitary confinement, his punishment came to an end. "Min-soo, your solitary confinement order has been lifted. Go back to your cell." The moment he stepped foot back into room A, he was face to face with the very people who had thrown him into the dark hole. Min-soo gritted his teeth, muttering, "Bastards." However, his cellmates suddenly changed their attitude in an unbelievable way. They laughed cheerfully. "We're sorry, man. We went a bit too far, right? Be Poppy again." Min-soo wondered if things could truly be resolved that easily. He accepted the apology, but clearly demanded, "Fine, I accept, but I need an apology from Sejun too." In a flash, a devastating stomp came crashing down right onto Min-soo's head. "Looking for me. Eat my heel and wake up." Not giving Min-soo a chance to fight back, the cronies immediately rushed in to pin him down. "Grab him, hurry, gag his mouth!" They roughly shoved a rag into his mouth, reducing him to helpless, muffled grunts. Sejun coldly ordered them to drag Min-soo into the bathroom. One guy laughed disgustingly while hauling him away. "Ha ha, that's the underwear I've been wearing for a whole week." Sejun smirked at Min-soo, who looked pathetic on the floor, and mocked him. "Mommy's boy, were you looking for me?" "Too bad there's someone who wants to see you even more than I do." He introduced the person who deeply harbored a grudge over Min-soo attacking his groin during their last clash. The guy sighed sadistically. Holding it in all day today was really tough. Minsu lay sprawled on the floor, his mouth gagged with the dirty rag, only able to let out sounds of pure despair. Just when he was hanging by a thread, a stern voice suddenly rang out, shattering the atmosphere. Enough! An authoritative police officer had appeared at the cell door out of nowhere. Sejun casually glanced at the newcomer and dropped a smug greeting. You must be the new guard, right? Don't mind us, we're doing this with permission. The guard coldly stepped forward and questioned back. Permission? From who? He decisively declared, I'll settle the score with you lot later, then unexpectedly extended his hand toward Minsu. Minsu blankly stared at the hand held out to him in utter shock. Amidst the suffocating, brutal atmosphere of the prison, the guard's voice suddenly softened, dropping a line Minsu couldn't believe he was hearing. Let's go home. Behind the glasses, the guard's face gradually came into clear view, along with a bright, warm smile. Yu Song, the older brother he had been longing for, had actually appeared in a police uniform. He gently took his hand and pulled his little brother up from the cold floor. With a brother this cool, who could even compete? To legitimately step into the tiger's den and save his brother, Yu Song had to make a highly calculating deal with his powerful father. In a luxurious karaoke room, the congressman was screaming into the microphone with an agitated look, belting out lyrics about snow-covered battlefields and the call of comrades. Drenched in sweat, he was so absorbed that it made the atmosphere incredibly tense and bizarre. Witnessing this passionate performance, General Jongxi, a 4-star general, couldn't hold back tears, moved by such fiery patriotism. He endlessly praised the congressman as a true patriot, the embodiment of the will of those who defend the nation. Meanwhile, Yu Song sat quietly between the two powerful men, secretly despising the hollow flattery. The congressman smugly believed that fast-tracking his son's enlistment by bypassing standard procedures was a luxurious privilege. He felt nothing but disdain for the other politicians who regularly manipulated records and forged psychiatric files to help their kids dodge the draft. He believed that instead of weaving fake heroic tales, it would be much better to just ship those immature brats off to the military right away. When the congressman asked if he was mentally prepared to enlist immediately, he decisively replied, "Yes, father. I will enlist right away." With eyes cold and full of resolve behind his glasses, Yu Sung affirmed that he had made every preparation to save his little brother. During the entire time Minsu was awaiting trial, Yu Seong had tirelessly delved into the shadows to gather information from those who had tasted the reform center firsthand. From interrogating Chang-su to meeting Se-min and the orphanage director, he knew the reform center was a true hell on earth. That was exactly why Yu Sung appeared at this place with an ironclad resolve. Standing among the solemn ranks of police officers saluting the flag, he swore to himself that he would drag his brother out of this hell as soon as possible. Back to the present, Yu Sung gently reached his hand out to his brother and softly said, "Let's go home, Minsu." He assured him that as long as Minsu did exactly what he said, he would soon have his freedom. Yu Sung was incredibly confident in his flawless plan, believing everything would go smoothly. But the smile on his lips suddenly froze. He thought it was a sure thing, but it fell apart. Yu Sung's perfect plan went up in smoke right from step one. Instead of staying calm, Minsu unexpectedly launched a powerful punch straight into the face of a massive inmate. Yu Sung looked helplessly at his stubborn brother. This kid... I told him to behave. Why is he throwing punches? While Sejun maintained a cold expression, observing the situation, the cellmates began screaming madly at Minsu's reckless action. The younger brother had completely lost control. "Bring it on, you bastards! I'll kill you all!" The situation grew even more chaotic as Yu Sung was surrounded by the terrifying inmates in the cell. A guy with a deformed, scarred face eyed him suspiciously, wondering if he was a guard or just a newcomer since he looked way too young. They declared that this room was originally meant for two and began threatening him with the unwritten rules that must be obeyed every night. Facing the encroaching monsters, Yu Sung maintained an astonishing composure. "Rules? You mean we have to fight?" He flashed a challenging smile and sealed the deal. "Then I suppose I should follow the rules tonight." The inmates laughed gleefully at the prey who had no intention of backing down. Minsu lunged like a wild beast, roaring with fury. "Come at me, you bastard!" Yet Sejun just slightly tilted his body, dodging the blow with ease and coldly mocked, "Idiot." Do you think swinging wildly like this does anything? With just a simple motion, Minsu lost his balance and tumbled to the floor. Sejun stood there looking down in contempt. You can't even keep your balance, yet you scream like a lunatic. What's more, Sejun's attention suddenly shifted to Yu-seong, who was standing tall amidst the knocked-out inmates, casually reminding them, isn't following the rules much better? Seeing that scene, Sejun was secretly astounded that this guard had subdued everyone in a flash. He wondered, what the hell is this guy doing? He's a type of person I've never met before. Taking advantage of Sejun's distraction, Minsu suddenly delivered a vicious kick straight to his face and roared, "Who are you looking at in the middle of a fight, darling?" Minsu laughed heartily in defiance. "Hey, long hair, your opponent is me. Don't look anywhere else." Sejun lowered his head slightly, a chilling aura beginning to radiate from him. He muttered that he had planned to handle this quietly and leave, but now things were different. Sejun looked up with a threatening glare and declared, "From now on, you're Poppy." Minsu shouted back, "Cut the crap! Be a dog yourself and enjoy it!" Immediately, Sejun unleashed a devastating counterattack, leaving Minsu no time to react. What is happening?" Minsu was stunned to realize he was completely overpowered. He cried out internally in pain as he took the thunderous blows. "This guy, he's absurdly strong." Sejun looked down coldly and asked a loaded question. "Do you know why Poppy became Poppy?" Ignoring the threat, Minsu charged madly with a furious scream. "I don't care, you bastard!" Poppy used to be the head of this room. Sejun coldly revealed the truth about the brutal hierarchy here. He threw a thunderous punch that dazed Minsu, adding, "But just like you, he didn't know his own limits, which is why he ended up like that." Minsu gritted his teeth, telling himself he couldn't allow himself to be dominated. He frantically grabbed Sejun's collar and yelled, "In this room, you're the most pathetic one, you bastard!" Minsu was determined not to be defeated so easily. However, the response to his resistance was a massive fist crashing down from above. A terrifying strike with incredible force pinned Minsu flat to the floor. He lay motionless in the middle of the cell floor, eyes wide in agony, only managing to gasp helplessly, "Damn it!" Crushed under Sejun's foot, Minsu bitterly realized, "This is so humiliating. I lost to this guy again." The humiliation only deepened when he saw the guard's shoes approaching. Minsu silently tormented himself, because every time he took a hit, his brother Yu-seong's face flickered before his eyes. Yu-seong bent down, looking at his gasping little brother, and asked, "Are you still alive?" Minsu felt absolutely terrible. He replied weakly, "Yeah." Yu-seong let out an exasperated sigh. He hoisted Minsu onto his shoulder decisively, muttering in confusion about why he was so light. Was he not getting any food here? "Where are you taking him?" Yu-seong coldly replied that his little brother needed a lesson and had to go to solitary confinement for causing a ruckus. Yu-seong unexpectedly leaned close to Sejun's ear and dropped a mysterious message. "Oh, that's right. She told me to tell you to stop fighting." The remark made Sejun freeze in shock. "What?" Yu-seong casually walked out of the room, leaving Sejun standing stunned amidst his lackeys lying scattered on the floor. Minsu woke up and realized he had been thrown into solitary confinement once again. "That long-haired bastard. Next time I see you, I'll rip all your hair out." A sudden stomach ache hit him, forcing Minsu to squat over the toilet. But he still felt an uneasy flutter in his chest, as if he had forgotten something incredibly important. Just as he finished his business, Minsu was horrified to find that the tap wasn't running. He panicked, wondering if the faucet was broken, and shuddered at the thought of not being able to clean his hands. Right then, a voice from outside reminded him that there was toilet paper right there, and the water only turned on at a scheduled time in the evening. Minsu sighed in relief upon finding the toilet paper roll, silently realizing that this time, his hands weren't even bound like in previous solitary stints. Memory suddenly rushed back, jolting Minsu awake. He lunged frantically, pounding hard on the cell door. He screamed, questioning the guard standing outside. "Hey, you crazy guard! Have you lost your mind? Why are you here?" Ignoring Yu-seong's sarcastic question about whether he'd wiped his hands yet, Minsu roared through his tears. "Who asked you to play hero and save me? You had a good family. You were supposed to live a happy life. You idiot. Didn't you get accepted into medical school? Don't save me. Just get out of my life. Just leave a murderer like me alone. Why ruin your life for a killer?" Minsu shrieked in despair through the solitary cell bars. He painfully confessed that if Yusong got stuck here because of him, he would live in torment and guilt for the rest of his life. Yusong stood outside, casually admitting that he really was an idiot. "Who called you a murderer? I believe you. I believe you didn't kill anyone, Minsu, because I'm your older brother." Hearing Minsu sniffle, Yusong teased him, asking if he was crying. Minsu grumpily denied it, even though his sobs were still clear as day. He asked anxiously if he could really get out of here if everything went exactly as Yusong said. Yusong confirmed that as long as Minsu stopped causing trouble so he wouldn't get thrown into solitary again, followed the program, and listened to him, everything would be fine. However, Minsu suddenly made a decisive request. "I want to fight that long-haired bastard one more time." When Yusong asked why he wanted to fight someone who would definitely beat him, Minsu gritted his teeth in fury. "That bastard insulted my mother. Damn it, I can endure anything else, but not someone who insults my mom." Seeing his brother's resolve, Yusong didn't stop him. Instead, he encouraged him. "Fight him. I'll teach you how to win." His eyes suddenly turned sharp and threatening as he looked through the solitary door slot. "If you lose to that guy, don't even show your face to me." The remaining 15 days in solitary were Minsu's only chance to prepare for this life-or-death rematch. In the darkness of the cell block, while everyone else was asleep, Sejun sat completely still, like a beast lying in wait. Yusong knew full well that 15 days was too short to rebuild Minsu's stamina. Therefore, the only thing he would teach him from now on was precisely how to defeat Sejun. "Do you really think just this is enough to take down that bastard, Sejun?" Minsu asked skeptically as he walked down the hallway. Yusong replied coldly, "If you lose, deal with it yourself. I won't lift a finger." Minsu could only click his tongue in resignation. Stopping in front of the cell door, Yusong gripped the handle tightly and asked one last time, "Have you memorized the tactics?" Minsu decisively stepped inside with an affirmative, "Of course, bro, just trust me." As soon as he stepped into the room, Minsu faced the fierce-looking faces waiting for him. Lee Chang-hee and his cronies mocked him smugly. "You're here? Enjoy your time in solitary?" The bastard sarcastically asked if being locked up made Minsu any tougher, demanding to test it right away. Minsu lowered his head and broke into a sleazy grin. "I told you I'd turn you all into Poppy, didn't I? But then I changed my mind." To the whole room's bewilderment, Minsu suddenly dropped to the floor in a prostrate position and screamed crazily, "Why should I be the one to turn you into Poppy?" Minsu guffawed in his pathetic state. "Wouldn't it be faster to just become Poppy myself? Go, method actor, Oscar's calling my name." This bizarre act was actually part of the endurance strategy Yu Xiong had taught him to win. First, he had to endure all the enemy's attacks and insults, waiting for that one perfect opportunity. Even when his cellmates used an ink pen to draw a grid of circles all over his chest to make a go board, Minsu had to grit his teeth and stay perfectly still. The endurance was pushed to the limit when the bullies casually played go right on Minsu's body, treating him as nothing more than a toy. They bickered loudly over cheating the score. "You bastard, you only have 33 points. The other guy wasn't having it, and fired back, "No, it's 43 points, idiot." Lying beneath them, Minsu screamed internally at this extreme humiliation. Finally, his breaking point was reached. He shot up, screaming frantically, "Damn it! I can't take this anymore!" Minsu's sudden resistance threw the delinquents in the room into a rage. Lee Chang-hee roared furiously, "You planning to quit being a pet punk?" Another guy was annoyed because the go game on Minsu's back got ruined mid-match. "You want me to set the hierarchy here straight again?" Amidst the mob's fury, Minsu could only grit his teeth, telling himself he had to endure. Outside the iron door, Yusong silently reminded his brother, "Endure it. Just 5 more days and I'll clear this room for you. The guards control everything during class time, so I can't intervene right now." Yusong slightly adjusted his glasses, his eyes full of anxious instruction. "Please, just don't fight until then. I'll have the stage ready for you in 5 days." However, reality was a series of brutal beatings. In excruciating pain, Minsu could only grit his teeth and bear it. "Hold it in. Payback day is coming." By the second day, Minsu began a miserable routine of forced labor. He was forced to kneel on the floor, both hands constantly scrubbing with a rag like a machine. The third day was a high-pressure reflection writing time. Amidst a towering pile of papers, frantic screams echoed endlessly. Moon Hyunjun hastily gripped his pen under the watchful eye of a violent bully. "Write it properly! Don't let me catch you slacking! Just writing 'sorry for being born' isn't enough! Damn it!" On the fourth day, Minsu was taken out to the grass and forced to act like a literal beast. He could only growl in absolute fury. During the meal that followed, the atmosphere suddenly grew strangely suffocating. Sejun and his gang stopped mid-bite. Their faces clearly showed shock and bewilderment at the unexpected scene unfolding right before their eyes. Minsu was kneeling on the floor, frantically devouring mouthfuls of rice like an actual animal. He deliberately barked excitedly, "Woof! Woof!" and praised the food as delicious, aiming to please the watching guards. Yet behind that submissive exterior lay an iron will. He told himself to endure because tomorrow was the fifth day, the day all this humiliation would come to an end. After that haunting meal, Minsu violently threw up in the bathroom, his body completely overloaded. Moon Hyunjun worriedly asked if he was pushing himself too hard, but Minsu just tiredly replied that he could still handle it. Seeing Minsu so exhausted he couldn't stop hiccuping, Hyunjun secretly slipped him an energy bar. He kindly advised Minsu to eat it to keep his strength up, because if he kept throwing everything up, his body would soon collapse. Hyunjun strictly warned Minsu to keep this an absolute secret from the others, as he had bought it with his own allowance. Right after that, during outdoor training, the guards continued to throw mocking remarks at Poppy number 1, Minsu. They sneered that even after being tortured to the point of vomiting, his pathetic look hadn't improved one bit. They smugly boasted that only they had the right to treat him like this. One inmate laughed so hard his face turned red. He kept insulting him. "What kind of running style is that? It looks ridiculous." But his smile quickly vanished, replaced by panic as he realized Hyunjun was charging straight toward a forbidden area. He frantically shouted a warning, because right in front of Hyunjun was the prison's kitchen crew. A massive collision occurred, throwing the area into chaos accompanied by furious cursing. 3 burly guys from the kitchen crew with scarred faces and a chilling aura looked down at Hyunjun. They growled, "Who the hell are you? You want to start something with us?" Hanging by a thread, Hyunjun still maintained the posture of an animal. From afar, Sejun was resting on the field. Sejun recalled the image of the guard, Yu Seong, carrying Minsu away, and started raising questions about the man's true identity. He wondered if someone had sent that guard here, or if perhaps his own sister had quietly orchestrated everything. Suddenly, a guy from the kitchen crew roared furiously, "Hey, the head of room A3! Sejun glanced over suspiciously upon seeing 3 guys in aprons approaching. The head of the kitchen crew jutted his chin and asked, "Is this your dog?" He roughly stomped on Hyunjun's head and scolded Sejun to manage his pets better. He growled, accusing Hyunjun of attacking his crew first, and asked if this was a declaration of war from room A3. As he continuously kicked Hyunjun's head, he laughed gleefully. "Ha ha, beating him up feels amazing. Hey, let me borrow him for a few days. I need to torture him some more." Seeing their roommate beaten, the others said nothing. After all, they couldn't defend the kitchen crew over a mere pet. Not far away, Minsu silently observed everything. He couldn't help but remember when he was shunned and bullied, Hyunjun didn't hesitate to give him his only piece of candy. Even though his brother had warned him absolutely not to cause trouble during this time, he simply couldn't stand by and watch Hyunjun get bullied. Suddenly, a blue plastic tray flew through the air at blinding speed. Before the kitchen guy could finish his mocking laugh, the tray smashed squarely into his face with a devastating thud. The impact was so strong it sent him flying backward, leaving his cronies in shock. Witnessing the scene, the surrounding inmates and even Sejun were stunned in disbelief. Minsu slowly stood up amidst the crowd's bewilderment. "Poppy number 2, he roared in fury. "You thugs caused trouble outside and ended up in here, huh? So you plan to keep up that cheap game in here too?" Minsu stepped forward, sarcastically pointing out that even if they were treated like pigs here, their dignity trampled and their will crushed, there was still a limit to everything. Helping Hyunjun up, Minsu snapped, "No matter how bad things get, playing dog, don't you bastards feel any shame?" Seeing his guy hit, the red-haired guy from the kitchen crew walked over and tapped Sejun's shoulder in warning. "This isn't a joke, right? Should I tell the kitchen boss you're declaring war on us? Without bothering to reply, Sejun instantly threw a straight elbow right into his face. Sejun roared fiercely at the kitchen crew's challenge. War? Bring it on! But before that, I need to deal with this rebel first. Minsu gritted his teeth, silently apologizing to his brother for once again ruining the perfect plan Yusong had painstakingly prepared. The surrounding inmates began murmuring excitedly. Some wondered if this was a war with the kitchen crew or a rebellion. Others didn't care at all and just wanted to see a brawl right now. Minsu bitterly realized he couldn't escape this mess, but he promised himself he would fulfill the remaining promise he made to his brother. The crowd endlessly mocked him. They firmly believed Sejun would easily crush the rookie murderer in a heartbeat. Sejun casually tied up his long hair and smirked dangerously. Craving a beating? I'll gladly serve you. In response to the provocation, Minsu suddenly flashed a manic smile. Clenching his fists, he made a bold proposal. Want a bet? Whoever wins this fight becomes the room boss. Standing opposite the towering leader, his eyes burned with confidence and a determination for revenge. He firmly declared, "This time I'm going to win." At the Juvenile Reform Center, the students were still required to attend basic educational classes. During this class, all authority belonged to the guards, meaning whatever happened here was completely under their control. Kang Yuseong sat by the window, silently calculating the Phase 1 plan, making Minsu the room boss. He was confident Minsu would defeat Sejun today to seize the top spot, having set up the perfect classroom environment for this match. The most dedicated coach of the year, right here. Yusong had arranged the desks and chairs into a circle, creating a private arena for his little brother. He stood checking his watch, muttering anxiously, "It's almost time, why aren't they here yet?" Suddenly, excited cheers echoing from the schoolyard caught his attention. Below the window, hundreds of students had formed a massive circle, constantly cheering and jeering. The crowd mercilessly mocked Minsu. Is he a comedian or a murderer? They marveled at Sejun's evasive skills and ridiculed Minsu for being unable to land a single hit. What kind of trash is he? Trying to make us die of laughter? Witnessing the unexpected scene, Yusong sighed helplessly. He rushed over and gripped the window bars tight, his face twisting in anger seeing his brother ignore the plan. He screamed frantically, "That bastard Lee Minsu, you idiot!" The cheers from the yard only grew louder as Sejun landed a devastating punch squarely on Minsu's face. The blow sent Minsu flying backward. To prepare for this fight, Yusong had taught Minsu the most practical combat techniques. Step 1 was a powerful hook to shatter the opponent's guard. Immediately following that, Step 2 was a vicious punch aimed straight at the liver. Step 3, an uppercut. Step 4, a mid-level kick. Step 5, a low kick. Step 6, a front kick. Step 7, a spinning kick. And Step 8, a roundhouse kick. Yusong continuously demonstrated masterful combat techniques to teach his brother. Watch this. I'll do a routine for you to learn. Finishing with a devastatingly powerful straight punch. He looked through the cell bars and asked, "It's been a while since you've seen that move. Look familiar?" He had never trained seriously, only mimicking a few moves. Did he still remember what he eavesdropped on as a kid? Yusong sternly questioned if Minsu thought that was enough to defeat his opponent. Minsu nervously admitted that Sejun was incredibly strong. Yusong silently evaluated that Sejun fought quite well for someone without formal training. Minsu was amazed, wondering if it was natural talent. But Yusong recognized that while Sejun's moves looked flashy, they lacked substance and had absolutely no fluidity in technique. Yusong adjusted his glasses and asserted that Sejun had no true combos. At the end of the day, he was just a regular guy who knew how to brawl. He would never beat someone properly trained. Hearing this, Minsu hung his head in sheer frustration, since in reality, he was getting battered without touching his opponent once. He complained skeptically, "I learned all these moves and I'm still getting thrashed. This sucks." Yusong then explained exactly why he wanted the fight to happen in the classroom with the prearranged desk layout. In response to Minsu's confusion over the difference of fighting there, Yusong explained that by continuously dodging, Minsu could force Sejun into a corner as the classroom had plenty of blind spots to trap him. Use the environment to pin him against the wall. Yusong affirmed that once he did that, Minsu's combos would definitely hit their mark. However, reality out on the field was playing out incredibly unfavorably. Sejun still stood firm and arrogant, while the surrounding crowd of inmates began booing in disappointment at the boring fight. They continuously insulted Minsu as a loser and challenged him to fight properly instead of just taking hits. Minsu wiped the blood streaming from his nose. He realized in shock, I'm done for. At this rate, I'm dead meat. Out on the assembly field, any hope for a perfect plan completely vanished. There wasn't a single wall in sight for Minsu to corner his opponent. Hundreds of inmates formed a massive circle, turning the open space into a life-or-death arena. Yusong dashed madly down the hallway, sheer panic painted across his face. He screamed in helplessness at his foolish little brother who never listened. Standing before the barbed wire fence, Yusong froze upon realizing the massive crowd completely blocked any view of the brawl. Tossing out his original calculations, Yusong decided he had to stop this fight immediately before things went too far. He roared, demanding everyone to disperse, but a sudden handful of popcorn flew straight into his face, making him stop. Yusong was shocked to see someone casually sitting there, watching the fight like an entertaining movie. It was the head warden himself. He was sitting comfortably on a chair, munching popcorn, and smirked. Watching a good movie here, what's with all the yelling? Yusong quickly snapped to attention, saluted, and explained he was the new guard trying to stop the brawl. But the warden simply replied with a cold question as to why he should do that. He casually chewed his popcorn and unexpectedly asked if Yusong liked watching wildlife documentaries featuring tiny mice. Yusong was stunned, unable to figure out what game this old man was playing. The man began offering a cruel analogy. In a nature show, when a hungry snake is hunting a mouse, the camera crew never intervenes, because a snake eating a mouse is simply the inevitable law of nature. With a manic look and a chilling smile, he declared the inmates' fight was exactly the same. It was all just part of the natural order that humans should respect. He growled, asserting that watching them kill each other was an unparalleled joy. Witnessing such extreme depravity, Yusong shuddered in horror, realizing the man running this place was a literal psychopath. The warden smirked, casually inviting Yusong to sit down and enjoy the show until someone finally landed a real hit. On the field, Minsu charged like a moth to a flame, screaming with determination in his heart, "Just one hit and you're done for!" He started applying what he'd learned, throwing out step 1, a feint hook to misdirect. But Sejun easily leaned back, dodging the punch by a hair's breadth, and asked coldly, "What are you doing?" Instantly, a devastating counterpunch smashed straight into Minsu's face, making him dizzy. In excruciating agony, Minsu could only pray silently, "Please, just one hit." Sejun didn't give his opponent a second to breathe. He pressed forward as Minsu desperately tried to execute step 2. Sejun mocked smugly, "Taking first-grade math over here?" Minsu clumsily threw step 3 but only hit thin air. Sejun casually dodged and kept mocking, "Oh, right! 2 comes after 1. Standing by the window, Yusong was sweating buckets as he watched his brother get completely overpowered. Minsu bitterly realized his reach was too short, his stamina was depleted, and all his tactics were utterly useless against a guy like Sejun. Despair washed over Minsu as he realized there were no walls around to complete the combo his brother had planned. He told himself helplessly that all he could do right now was take the beating. Sejun unleashed a thunderous kick straight into Minsu's body. The impact was so forceful it sent him flying backward into the crowd of spectating inmates. The crowd stirred, yelling in annoyance, "Damn it! Why'd you fly over here? Sejun, you idiot! Aim better! Get out of the way!" Witnessing that pathetic scene, Yusong painfully covered his face. Sighing in defeat, he accepted it. Taught him like that and he still loses. Might as well go to sleep. Minsu lay battered amidst the crowd's curses. "Get lost, you loser murderer!" He gritted his teeth, bearing the humiliation. "Go ahead and mock me." But the pain shooting from his knees through his entire body made his willpower waver. Minsu thought to himself that if he kept going, he'd just lose miserably like last time. It was better to surrender and avoid getting hurt worse. Suddenly, rough hands from the surrounding inmates grabbed him and yanked him up. They screamed furiously in his face, "How long you gonna lay there? Why are you spacing out, idiot? Fight back!" "If you quit now, you'll have to deal with me." Minsu looked around in confusion, realizing he was trapped by furious faces forcing him to continue the fight. Sejun strolled over lazily, dropping his final insult. "Mommy's boy, what are you doing? Looking for your mom?" Minsu lowered his head, but then a sleazy grin suddenly spread across his lips. "Hey," Sejun stopped, asking suspiciously, "something funny?"
He calmly replied, "Oh, nothing. My bad, I just remembered something."
Baring bloody teeth and a manic smile, "A way to land a combo on you." He declared smugly, "I remembered it. Heh heh, I found a way to land my combo on you." On the sidelines, the crowd lost their patience and roared, urging them on. "Hey, recess is over. Wrap it up quick, you idiots. What are you looking at? You two fighting or confessing your love?" Sejun lost his patience too. "Mommy's boy, let's end this." "Time's almost up." Minsu slowly stood up and casually replied, "Fine, I was just about to end it myself." He knew how to use the combo, but how could he lure him into the trap? The memory of the conversation in solitary flashed back. When Yusong suggested that simply backing Sejun into a corner would guarantee victory. But Minsu had immediately spotted the flaw and asked back, "Don't you get it?" He analyzed that no matter how you looked at it, Sejun would never be stupid enough to let himself get backed into a corner. Standing outside the bars, Yusong nodded in agreement. "True, but once you corner him, you can bait him to come closer." Minsu sat on the floor, sighing sarcastically. "I already thought of that, genius, but even if I try, it's not a sure thing. If so, this whole plan is trash." Hearing that, Yusong gave a loaded smirk. "In that case, let me teach you a magic keyword that will make Sejun charge straight at you instantly." Minsu, shocked, grabbed the window bars tight and yelled, "You holding out on me? Why didn't you give me the good stuff sooner?" Yusong's eyes turned sharp and icy as he confirmed with absolute certainty. "Just hearing this word will make Sejun lose total control." Minsu frantically urged him, "Tell me what it is right now. What the hell is it?" Back to reality in the yard, Minsu suddenly shouted loudly, "Hey Sejun, is Gossamin pretty?" He clutched his face, laughing maniacally with wide, glaring eyes. Instantly, Sejun lost his mind, his face twisted in utter rage. He roared, "Who told you my sister's name?" Then lunged forward with a ton-heavy punch toward Minsu, startling him. "Where did you hear that name?" Sejun roared furiously. Witnessing that extreme reaction, Minsu secretly rejoiced because his brother's magic keyword had actually worked. Sejun had completely lost his mind, screaming and demanding to know how Minsu knew about his sister. Looking at his crazed opponent, Minsu recalled the title, "Mommy's boy" Sejun used to insult him, and fired back with contempt. "Is that the best insult you can come up with?" To Sejun's utter shock, Minsu decisively raised his arm and spectacularly blocked that thunderous punch. Instantly, Minsu grabbed his opponent's collar and roared, "You skirt chaser! Now you're gonna get it!" He unleashed a decisive strike before Sejun could react, accompanied by a sarcastic warning. "Don't go crying for your sister now, you hear me?" Sejun smirked, regaining his composure. He pressed on, asking what knowing his sister had to do with this fight. He tried to step back to dodge Minsu's punch, but harsh reality struck. The massive crowd of inmates tightly surrounding them began to jostle and push, cramping the space. Sejun was shocked to realize his back was completely blocked by this living wall of people. Seizing this once-in-a-lifetime opening, Minsu immediately deployed Step 1, slamming a devastating hook right into his opponent. Minsu yelled in excitement, "Come here, taste the pain!" Sejun fell into a critical situation with nowhere left to dodge. He tried to risk a preemptive strike, but his arm got unexpectedly wedged tight in the chaotic crowd. While Sejun was still reeling from being unable to move, Minsu decisively unleashed the finisher, Step 2, a punch aimed squarely at his opponent's liver. Sejun gritted his teeth, realizing he'd fallen into a trap. He screamed in despair, trapped so tightly from behind that all movement was utterly restricted. Seizing the moment, Minsu followed up with Step 3, an uppercut that snapped his opponent's head back. Witnessing the scene from afar, Yusong realized in shock that his brother wasn't following the original plan at all. He had told Minsu to use the classroom desks or walls to corner the opponent, but now, Minsu had found a far more ruthless method. He was using the crowd of inmates themselves as a living wall to trap Sejun in the middle. Minsu relentlessly chained the Step 1 and Step 2 combos, leaving Sejun with no choice but to absorb the barrage of blows. In a panic, Seijun realized he couldn't dodge or counterattack if he just stood there and tried to slip to the side to escape. But Minsu saw right through that intent. He unleashed Step 5, a brutally powerful low kick aimed straight at the leg, leaving Seijun in agony. Minsu grinned triumphantly and instantly cycled back to Step 1, raining relentless punches on his opponent's face. Seijun struggled, noticing his right side was blocked, so he tried to find an out on the opposite side. But he was instantly cut off by Step 4, a mid-level kick slamming straight into his ribs. "Where do you think you're going?" Seijun began to spiral into absolute panic as he realized he was completely locked down with absolutely nowhere left to run. In Seijun's eyes right now, Minsu suddenly appeared as massive and terrifying as a monster towering over him. He madly rained down a barrage of blows, mixing every combo from 1, 2, 3, 4, then finally ignoring it all, unleashing a non-stop, relentless flurry of Step 1 punches. With a bloody, swollen face, Seijun could only try to hold on to his last shred of consciousness, desperately throwing out punches in a hopeless counterattack. "What the hell are you doing? You think swinging wildly like this is gonna hit me?" Minsu delivered a thunderous punch that sent his opponent reeling backward and roared, "You mess with my mom, you're dead!" His fury exploding, Minsu furiously rained blows down. "You bastard! Just thinking about it pisses me off even more." He began to execute the combo chain exactly to the rhythm he had practiced. Minsu roared as he relentlessly attacked. "What the hell do you know?" Witnessing the scene, the crowd of inmates began to murmur in shock. "What's with him? Did he lose control? Is Seijun really gonna lose like this?" Seijun struggled to defend himself in pain. He realized he couldn't take another hit and resolved that his next strike had to connect. However, reality was crueler than he imagined. Minsu was faster, adding a devastating punch that left Seijun dizzy. Minsu panted in absolute fury. "What do you know about me or my mom to dare open your mouth? Apologize right now, Seijun." Minsu still didn't stop. He screamed, demanding his opponent apologize immediately. The explosive power left Seijun completely exhausted. He gasped out voicelessly, "I..." and then collapsed to the floor. Minsu threw one final punch, full of resentment. "Apologize to my mom now!" The entire arena seemed to hold its breath. The cellmates stood frozen, eyes wide, unable to believe what had just happened right in front of them. What the hell is this? See, Seijun got taken down." Minsu stood there, drenched in sweat and panting heavily from exhaustion. Damn it, this guy. Right to the very end, he still wouldn't apologize. The crowd began to stir, realizing the impossible outcome. Seijun lost? Minsu won? Some still mockingly called him a foolish poppy, wondering if Minsu would actually become the new room boss now. Meanwhile, others claimed Seijun was weak to begin with to lose to a guy like that. Suddenly, a stern voice rang out, shattering the chaos. "Everyone, stand back!" the guards roared, forcing everyone to perform the inspection protocol. Instantly, long lines of inmates bowed their heads in unison and chanted, "Oink, oink!" Amidst the submissive ranks, a guard with an authoritative presence walked through coldly. "Well, I didn't think you'd win, but you actually did it." The warden stepped forward with a thrilled smile. He was incredibly amused to witness such a great wildlife show where a mouse managed to take down a snake. Minsu panted in exhaustion. He wondered in shock, "I'm the mouse and Seijun is the snake?" The warden leaned close to his face, smirking sarcastically. "You've been scheming since the moment you got here, and now you even managed to entertain me during a fight." Minsu could only grit his teeth and let out humiliating squeaks just to stay alive. When asked how to handle Seijun, who was unconscious on Yusong's shoulder, the warden casually ordered, "Toss him in solitary or whatever." Yusong silently carried Seijun past his brother. He sighed in exasperation, looking at Minsu's stubborn face. "Wow, who does he take after to be so disobedient?" Minsu smirked back in defiance. "Who else? He takes after his big brother, that's who." Even with a bloody and bruised face, Minsu still clearly showed his smugness at successfully taking down his opponent. Yusong lightly adjusted his glasses, his eyes turning sharp and calculating. "Show's over. Moving on to Plan B." The scene unexpectedly shifted to a quiet art studio. Seaman was focused at her easel. She asked softly, full of worry, "So, my little brother got thrown into solitary confinement?" Yusong clearly looked flustered, sweat beading on his forehead as he had to explain the unexpected mishap. That wasn't part of the original plan. Things went off track. I'm sorry. Seaman let out an annoyed huff. She demanded he stop moving so she could focus on finishing her drawing. Yusong was straining to pose like a muscular statue, holding an apple while half naked as a model. Seaman was getting grumpy because he kept constantly shifting his posture, ruining the composition she was working so hard on. Yusong complained tiredly, struggling, "But how much longer do I have to hold this pose? This pose is too hard to hold. Maybe we should pick something else." He looked around, pointed to a completely nude statue, and suggested, "How about that one?" Seeing Yusong hesitant because that statue was a bit too far, Seaman casually stated that was exactly the point. She coldly ordered him to stop complaining, since the drawing session was over. Yusong timidly asked if he could look at the drawing yet, but Seaman just sighed and said his moving had ruined the piece, leaving him to mumble apologies. Seaman looked confidently at her work and asserted, "This is good enough for me to get into art school as valedictorian, right?" In stark contrast to her confidence, Yusong looked at the drawing, his eyes rolling back, unable to believe what he was seeing. This is art? And this is me?" Seaman casually told him he didn't need to look so apologetic. It was just that the model was a bit lacking. She suddenly changed the subject, asking if he was worried about his brother since he just got sent to solitary. Yusong thought she was talking about that disastrous drawing, but Seaman warned him seriously that he was in huge trouble now. "I mean, your brother got tangled up with the kitchen crew. The female kitchen crew, and I know full well they're an incredibly tight-knit bunch. You mess with one, the whole crew will come after your brother. And among them, there was one person Yusong had to be especially careful of. In the cafeteria, a guy with massive, bulging, vein-covered arms suddenly appeared in front of Minsu and asked, 'You're Minsu, right?' That was Dubo, the head of the kitchen crew." Minsu calmly confirmed his identity. Instantly, Dubo dumped a massive, overflowing mound of food onto his tray. Minsu was stunned. "Huh? What are you talking about? Wait, isn't this way too much?" Was he trying to fatten Minsu up to slaughter him? Seaman explained exactly why this guy was so terrifying. Dubo might look like a nice guy, but in reality, he was extremely dangerous and unhinged. A horrifying truth about Dubo was revealed. He was the one who nearly killed 2 guards. Minsu froze, staring at the food spilling off his tray in shock. Dubo, the kitchen boss, broke into a sinister grin and declared, "My crew said you messed with them. You deserve every bit of this." He continued piling on food while dropping a chilling threat. "You're going to regret ever messing with this kitchen crew." Seeing his opponent's fierce face, Minsu immediately played dumb. "Huh? Me? Messed with the kitchen crew?" When pressed about his identity again, he quickly smooth-talked his way out. "I am Minsu, but maybe it's someone with the same name. It's a pretty common name, after all." Seeing his sincere act, Dubo suddenly changed his tune. He scratched his head and apologized. "Oh, really? My bad, eat up, I already apologized, so let's let this go." However, another kitchen crew member suddenly yelled, exposing him. "Hey, he's lying! You need to double-check, it's him. He's the one who threw the trash can lid." Minsu, realizing the jig was up, bolted for his life, leaving everyone in shock. "Wait, what the heck?" Dubo roared upon realizing he'd been tricked. He continuously screamed Minsu's name, his voice echoing through the cafeteria. "Damn it, Minsu!" Meanwhile, Minsu ran, laughing smugly. "Heh heh! Almost died there!" The shouts of "Stop right there!" continued relentlessly chasing him. In another turn of events, at the majestic presidential office, the South Korean president, Han Man-soo, stepped out with an authoritative stride and a bright smile to welcome his guests. "Thank you all for traveling so far to attend this summit." At the high-level meeting between party leaders and the president, Han Man-soo stepped out looking elated, shaking Congressman Kang's hand warmly. "Congressman, you're looking radiant. Ha ha ha." Congressman Kang quickly replied with a professional diplomatic smile. "It's all thanks to you, Mr. President." Together, they put on a show of unity for the flashing cameras, declaring they would put aside all rivalries to focus on national interests. However, while the cameras were still flashing, Han Man-soo suddenly leaned in close to Congressman Kang, bringing up how they used to be rivals in the presidential race. He sneered arrogantly. But now, for the future of the country, make sure you work hard as my subordinate. Got it? The moment he finished speaking, Han Mansu suddenly gave Congressman Kang a humiliating slap on the butt. Congressman Kang froze, sweating from shock and humiliation. What the hell is this? Did he just slap my butt, right in front of the entire country? His fury exploding the moment he got home, Congressman Kang furiously rained blows on his punching bag to vent his anger. He gritted his teeth, roaring in resentment. Han Mansu! How dare you humiliate me like this? Take this! In his fury, he turned to Yu Seong and roared, Your father is suffering this humiliation. What do you think about that? Standing before the planning board, Yu Seong calmly asserted that bringing down President Han Mansu was actually much easier than imagined. He reasoned that if they just destroyed the old man's biggest political foundation, the Juvenile Reform Center, everything would crumble. That was also the real reason Congressman Kang sent his son into that hellhole to be an inside man. When asked about his progress, Yu Seong coldly revealed that what he witnessed inside that facility was absolutely not the educational environment the public believed it to be, but a brutal scene of tyranny. Yu Seong continued to expose the horrifying truth. The place forced children to commit violence against each other. All forms of abuse were rampant, and brawls were deliberately ignored just for entertainment. He asserted firmly, This place isn't a reform school. It's an inferno. Yu Seong's face grew somber, thinking about the brutal reality unfolding inside those iron walls. Hearing this, Congressman Kang clapped in smug approval. Excellent. So the Reform Center was Mansu's weak point. This congressman was terrifyingly calculating. He believed that just leaking this info to the press could take down his opponent instantly with a single blow. However, the sly old fox suddenly stopped, realizing that was still not enough. He coldly reminded Yu Seong that juvenile delinquents were, after all, malicious criminals, and the true victims probably just wanted them to suffer even more. Congressman Kang ordered Yu Seong to go back and dig up even more horrific things from the inside. Yu Seong silently walked out of the room, his heart heavy at his father's cruel demand. Back at the prison, Yu Seong, deep in thought in his uniform, muttered to himself, It's still not enough. He stood watching the inmates crawling flat on the ground in a humiliating posture, drenched in sweat under the scorching sun. Suddenly, Yu Seong clearly called Minsu's name. Step out here! Minsu looked up in confusion, not understanding what his brother was planning. Yu Seong loudly declared that Minsu had to step out to perform separate, specialized exercises. Minsu rejoiced, silently thanking his brother, thinking he'd get priority to rest. Damn, this is great. Thanks, bro. He celebrated a bit too early. Yu Seong suddenly roared, forcing him into a new, even more horrifying, torturous posture. Lobster! Minsu frantically screamed in pain and humiliation as he was forced to crawl like a crab across the yard. Lobster! Lobster! Damn it, lobster! Yu Seong quietly explained that if Minsu was the only one exempt from training, it would arouse suspicion, so he had to make his situation look even more pathetic than the others. Minsu screamed in frustration, questioning this disastrous help while still writhing on the ground. Explaining Phase 2 of the plan, the Juvenile Reform Center operated on an extremely strict merit and demerit system. Yu Seong pulled out a detailed list, explaining that only when an inmate accumulated 100 merit points would they be considered for parole. Conversely, the more demerits they had, the infinitely further away their freedom would be. He looked down at his sweating brother in the lobster pose and coldly informed him, Your score is a solid -50. With 2 stints in solitary and a massive brawl, Minsu hadn't earned a single merit point. Minsu's eyes went wide. He gasped in despair. How? How am I supposed to earn points? The fastest way for you to earn a large number of points right now is to volunteer as a kitchen helper for the kitchen crew. Just hearing the words kitchen crew, Minsu screamed in shock. He instantly remembered the fierce face of Dubo, the kitchen boss with his chilling aura. Minsu screamed in panic. No way! That bastard is there! I'll die if I go in there! Those guys are looking to get me! He'd rather choose torture than face those demons. I don't care! Just kill me! I'd rather stay out here! Minsu continually thrashed on the ground in protest of his brother's plan. But whenever a guard walked by, Minsu had to return to his torturous pose and shout, "Lobster!" Even though his mouth mechanically shouted "lobster" on command, inside he was violently screaming, "Never! Lobster! Just keep doing the lobster!" He'd rather endure this physical pain than step foot in that deadly kitchen. He frantically screamed internally. He'd rather call out this crustacean's name 1,000 times than ever join the kitchen crew. Witnessing his brother's extreme stubbornness, Yusong sighed in exasperation. He yielded and promised to find another job to help him earn points. Minsu rejoiced as if he'd struck gold, silently grateful for having the best older brother in the world. The atmosphere suddenly grew peaceful under the gentle afternoon sun. The rustling of leaves mixed with the chirping of birds created a rare moment of tranquility in the prison. Inside the classroom, the curtains swayed gently in the cool breeze, creating perfect conditions for a sound afternoon nap. Minsu lay slumped on his desk, enjoying the relaxation after an exhausting morning of torturous exercises. He groggily muttered to himself, "I wish I could sleep in a bit longer." However, the continuous sound of a simulated motor buzzed in his ear, interrupting his nap. His anger flaring, Minsu slammed his hand on the desk and yelled crazily, "Damn it, let me sleep!" He furiously scolded his cellmates for daring to make those noisy sounds with their mouths, asserting he didn't need these robot vacuums anymore. Down on the floor, the inmates were still crawling flat, using their mouths to mimic motor sounds while mechanically wiping the floor according to the bizarre order Minsu had established. One guy even confidently claimed he'd work better if he made his own motor noises. He enthusiastically announced that if he got too loud, he'd switch to sleep mode to avoid bothering others. Minsu sat watching, silently thinking the cleaning was almost done, but then started worrying when he realized cleaning a classroom only earned a meager 1 merit point. At this rate, he wondered how long it would take to accumulate the 100 points needed for freedom. Just then, the guard walked in and asked if the cleaning was finished. Minsu quickly saluted and reported it was almost done. The guard informed Minsu that he had to move to the next location alone to do the supplementary volunteer work he had signed up for earlier. Minsu rejoiced, silently thanking his brother Yusong for setting up such a lucrative point-earning opportunity for him. However, the moment he stepped foot into the new location, the smile on Minsu's lips froze completely. Before him wasn't the easy job he imagined, but the kitchen boss waiting with a face full of murderous intent. He smirked threateningly. "The liar Minsu makes a comeback, huh? You're here. Get ready to eat pain." Minsu looked around in shock, realizing he was standing in the middle of the deadly kitchen, surrounded by the burly guys of the kitchen crew. He froze, realizing he'd been lured inside. "This isn't what I signed up for. You promised not to send me to the kitchen crew, sold out by my own brother." Inside, he screamed the name of the brother who had betrayed his promise. "Kang Yusong, you bastard!" Dubo, a burly guy harboring a burning dream to become South Korea's top chef, was wildly tossing a wok amidst towering, smoking flames. His strength was truly formidable, as his right arm easily controlled the 3 kilos cast iron wok, effortlessly flipping up to 2 kilos of food. Meanwhile, his left hand was dedicated to the more delicate tasks of seasoning and presentation. However, the harsh reality was clear on the inmates' food trays. They endlessly complained, "Damn it, this tastes awful. How long do I have to eat this crap? A chef like this should get sued." To Dubo, criticizing his food was nothing short of a direct insult to his honor. He gritted his teeth, veins bulging all over his face, struggling to hold back his fury. "These bastards, I have to endure." As he looked back at the chaotic kitchen, with fires burning out of control and food flying everywhere, it was obvious there wasn't a single true culinary talent in this hellhole to assist him. The kitchen nightmare continued to escalate as screams rang out. "Ah! The pasta is all burnt! It's burnt! It's burnt!" A lackey with a goofy, eager face brought out a pitch-black pan and cheered. "Dubo, I figured out how to make oil! Our nation is now an oil-producing country!" It didn't stop there. A pot of soybean soup suddenly turned deep purple, making another guy ask in confusion about the color. "Who put purple cabbage in here? Step forward!" He completely lost control, roaring in tears. An entire kitchen full of people and not a single one knows how to cook. Though he desperately wanted to rip his useless lackeys apart, he considered them members of his tribe and was forced to swallow his anger. However, with Minsu, it was a completely different story. Dubo coldly grabbed a wok, looming toward Minsu with a terrifying aura. He growled, asserting Minsu had insulted his tribe and would receive absolutely no mercy. Towering behind the bewildered younger boy, Dubo declared threateningly, "I'm going to teach you with this wok." But then he suddenly froze, his eyes widening in shock as he stared at the flaming wok. Right in front of him, Minsu was displaying masterful cooking skills, dual-wielding woks with highly professional seasoning techniques that made the kitchen boss unable to believe his eyes. Overcome with excitement, Dubo suddenly lunged, lifting Minsu into the air and roared, "Kid, where did you learn to cook?" Minsu awkwardly replied that he only used to help out at the orphanage. Hearing that, the kitchen boss suddenly burst into tears, snot and tears streaming down his face in choked-up emotion. He muttered happily, "I found it. I finally found it. I knew this day would come." Dubo frantically hugged Minsu tight, screaming in excitement, "Don't worry, I'm here for you. My little darling." He scooped Minsu up and ran laps around the kitchen, laughing uproariously, claiming Minsu was the kitchen crew's treasure, completely ignoring the kid screaming in despair, demanding this madman put him down. Meanwhile, in the pantry, amidst a scattered pile of candy wrappers and trash, the kitchen crew lackeys were secretly gathered, eating stolen snacks and seething because their original plan had failed. They had intended to get Dubo and Minsu to fight, but instead, Dubo was clinging to him like a shadow. One guy gritted his teeth, wondering how to make Dubo hate Minsu, and instantly a malicious idea struck. If Minsu's cooking tastes awful, he'll definitely be hated. The group laughed gleefully, deciding they would secretly put garbage in Minsu's food to get rid of him, smugly asserting, "This time, Minsu is definitely a goner." However, their smiles instantly vanished when Yusung suddenly appeared right at the pantry door. He flashed a cold smile, asserting he had finally found the reason why supplies had been constantly disappearing. Facing the panicking criminals, Yusung growled, reminding them that thieves must face the appropriate consequences. Even as they screamed, challenging him that this was kitchen crew territory, Yusung decisively meted out punishment. In a flash, he had taken down everyone who planned to cause trouble for his brother. Looking at the pile of bodies at his feet, Yusung sighed in relief. He silently told himself he had been incredibly worried because Minsu hadn't wanted to join the kitchen crew. Yusung looked at the defeated losers at his feet, silently thinking Minsu was adapting quite well. But he still wondered who had pushed his brother into the kitchen crew if it wasn't him. Meanwhile, in the warden's office, 2 guards rushed in to report, sending the head warden into peak excitement. He thought the kitchen crew had just had another bloody brawl, but the truth utterly killed his mood. Instead of a fight, today's menu was his favorite omelet rice. The warden sighed in deep disappointment, having expected a good show rather than this boring meal. However, to please their boss, the 2 guards performed an incredibly bizarre and cheesy magic spell to make the food taste better. Though initially confused after taking a bite, the warden had to nod and admit the food was actually fantastic. In the cafeteria, the atmosphere suddenly grew incredibly serious. Dubo yelled loudly, announcing that today was a special day that only came once a month, demanding everyone be extremely careful during preparation. Minsu calmly stood there, not understanding what was going on, especially when Dubo ordered them to prep a brand new bar of cucumber-scented soap. He wondered silently, "Wait, are we taking a shower or cooking here?" But his astonishment peaked when he saw the kitchen boss decisively start grating the bar of soap on a shredder. The bizarre cooking process continued with adding double the amount of olive oil to the soap and then melting it in a double boiler over high heat. Dubo passionately lectured about adding finely ground basil powder as an essential ingredient for fragrance. Finally, he squeezed in tangerine juice for extra vitamin E, creating a mixture he claimed was both moisturizing and incredibly fragrant. Dubo frantically stirred until the ingredients blended perfectly, then ordered it to cool for a bit. "Done!" Dubo shouted with immense pride. "You're getting a bit ahead of yourself there, buddy." Minsu looked at the bowl of thick mixture with a blank expression. "What the hell is this? Are you planning to eat that?" Dubo laughed gleefully. "Eat it? No way! This is our kitchen crew's natural hair wax." As he spoke, he smoothly ran his hand through his dreadlocks, styling them. His lackeys began flocking over, competing to groom themselves and asking for favors. "Hey, be careful not to let it clump. Fix the back for me," Minsu asked in confusion. "So it's not food, but hair wax? But what kind of special day requires you guys to do your hair like this?" Dubo smirked and replied, "It's the day the new ingredients are delivered. Because on delivery day, we get to see the girls from the Female Reform Center." Dubo smiled with anticipation. Right on cue, a group of female inmates appeared, cheerfully carrying in boxes of supplies. "Dubo, hey, why are you guys so late? We took all the good stuff." A mischievous girl noticed the new face. "Hey, who's the new guy? Hi there." Dubo explained that once a month, the cafeteria received supplies, and they had to share them with the female kitchen crew. For the guys here, this was the sole privilege of joining the kitchen crew. Just then, a girl was struggling to carry a heavy box. "Ugh, so heavy! Unnie, help me! Girls shouldn't carry heavy things." One of Dubo's lackeys quickly rushed over to take the box with an eager face. He clearly declared, "I got this. Ladies don't need to lift a finger." But that was nothing compared to Dubo. To show off his masculinity, the kitchen boss single-handedly hoisted a towering stack of boxes. This still isn't enough. A real man should carry this much. The girls watched in awe and praised him. "Wow, Dubo is so strong. Look, put more on top. Wow, so cool." Minsu stood on the sidelines watching the scene in exasperation. "What the hell are you guys doing? You're gonna break your backs. What's wrong with him?" "This boy is so cute, and so tiny too." The girls unexpectedly surrounded Minsu, teasing him, making him irritated. "Get lost!" "I'm not tiny." But his pouting only made them more excited. "Even when you're mad, you're so cute. You're adorable. Let me help you carry that." Minsu stubbornly refused, but started to waver. "I don't need help, but really?" Witnessing that scene, Dubo gritted his teeth in fury. "That bastard! He dares to slack off to flirt with girls?" Just as Dubo was burning with jealousy, a petite girl suddenly timidly approached from behind and gently tugged on his apron. The petite girl, her face flushed with shyness, held out an envelope sealed with a bright red heart. She whispered, "Here, please take this before the boss sees." Dubo's rough hands trembled as he took the letter. His heart pounded wildly as if it wanted to leap out of his chest. He teared up, cheering silently in his heart. Could it be a love letter? Watching the girl run away, leaving behind a mischievous smile, Dubo completely lost himself in a sweet delusion. In the kitchen boss's mind right now was a perfectly fulfilling vision of the future. He dreamed of a grand wedding, where he wore a sharp suit walking alongside his beautiful bride, amidst everyone's applause and blessings. Dubo even imagined his future wife gently asking him, "What should we name our baby?" Just got the letter and already naming kids. Then the image of an adorable little girl named Yeji appeared, filling him with overflowing happiness. Dubo's delusion went so far that he saw himself as the father of a massive family with 5 young kids. He gleefully called each one's name, "Is everyone ready?" The whole family chimed yes in unison, and then they took a warm family photo together. Back to reality, Dubo was crying and laughing crazily from emotion. Finally, it's my turn to get one of these. Let's see what kind of romantic love song she wrote. However, the moment he opened the letter, the smile on his lips instantly froze as he read the first line. "To the head of Room A." Dubo's face completely deformed from the shock, veins bulging terrifyingly. Meanwhile, in the quiet kitchen, Minsu was struggling to carry a heavy box. He complained tiredly as he worked. "Those kitchen crew guys are too busy helping the girls, they won't even bring our share." Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over Minsu from behind. When he realized it was Dubo, Minsu asked in confusion. Dubo towered closer with a chilling aura. He growled, "You're the head of Room A, right?" Minsu casually confirmed, "Yeah, that's right. What's up, Dubo? Need something?" The kitchen boss suddenly asked a bizarre question. "Do you know what November 22nd is?" Dubo declared clearly. "That's the date of my 3rd wedding anniversary. 3 years from now." Delusional beyond saving, Minsu was stunned. "What?" Dubo continued interrogating him about Yeji, then roared threateningly, making Minsu start trembling in fear. He asserted firmly, "Yeji is the name of my 5th child." Dubo's madness reached its peak. He gritted his teeth and screamed, She would have been a little girl with a ponytail born into this beautiful world if you hadn't stolen my wife. His eyes glowing red, Dubo roared in absolute fury. I'll kill you, you bastard who stole my wife. Minsu only had time to widen his eyes in terror as a massive fist hurtled straight toward him. Wait! Why the sudden? Before he could finish, Dubo's devastating punch slammed down right next to his head, shattering the wall behind him in an instant. Minsu quickly dodged but was still shocked by that destructive power. He screamed in anger. What is this? Are you actually trying to kill me? Dubo had completely lost his mind by now. He muttered in a frenzy, Die, Minsu, the enemy of my children. What children? You psycho! Exploiting his opponent's opening, Minsu launched a flying double kick straight to his face. However, Dubo seemed completely unfazed. He quickly grabbed the boy's ankle and slammed him hard onto the ground without hesitation. Dubo's frenzy hadn't stopped. He roared, How dare you steal my future wife? Minsu realized in horror that if he took one more hit like that, his head would surely be smashed to pieces. Minsu scrambled to find a way to counterattack. He calculated silently, if I can just disable this monster's right arm, he'll be nothing. But reality was far crueler. He bitterly realized his opponent's reach was too long. He couldn't get close at all. The nightmare still wasn't over, as Dubo's left-handed punches also carried terrifying power. Minsu continuously absorbed heavy blows, feeling as if his body was colliding directly with massive boulders. The impact was so forceful it sent Minsu flying. Suppressing the pain, Minsu told himself that at least his opponent's right arm was currently trapped. However, Dubo screamed, demanding Minsu give everything back, then brutally ripped an iron cabinet door right off its hinges. Minsu was horrified to see his restraint completely vanish. While the madman kept screaming about his plans to take So-Yang hiking at Bukansan, he frantically swung the heavy iron door in a wild attack. Dubo wildly smashed the iron plate down, forcing Minsu to desperately dodge. He realized he was in a dire situation, backed into a corner with no way out. In the moment he faced the cold wall, Minsu suddenly remembered the blind spot strategy his brother had taught him. Dubo screamed about his first kiss with his future wife and threw a punch aimed straight at Minsu's face. Despite the terrifying aura surrounding him, Minsu spoke up coldly. I don't know who So-Yang is, but your date plans absolutely suck. He decisively grabbed his opponent and mocked that no girl would ever want to go out with a guy like him. Exploiting the opponent's overconfidence, Minsu recalled the position swap technique to execute his combo. He decisively spun around, using all his strength to shove the giant back against the wall to turn the tables. But no matter how hard he tried, the guy's body wouldn't budge an inch. Looking at biceps thicker than Minsu's head, you knew this matchup was doomed. He crazily screamed, accusing Minsu of stealing his pure love and his children's future. Dubo roughly grabbed Minsu's face and slammed his head hard against the iron cabinet, leaving Minsu screaming in pain. He roared in complete lack of control, asserting that Minsu's punishment had only just begun. Die! Dubo roared madly, throwing a ton-heavy punch aimed straight at his opponent's head. Minsu realized in terror he couldn't dodge this fatal blow in the cramped space. Teetering on the line between life and death, he quickly grabbed an object right beside him to fight back. At the same time, over at the female reform center, the female inmates were complaining about the heavy kitchen work and expressing how much they missed Seimin. One girl noticed a box of onions left behind and guessed it belonged to the boys' side. Even though her cellmates tried to stop her, afraid of Dubo's fierce looks, a dark-haired girl with a punk vibe eagerly volunteered to return it. She casually thought Dubo was actually pretty cute, so there was nothing to be scared of. This girl is weird. Needs her eyes checked ASAP. Meanwhile, in the boys' kitchen, the chaotic chase continued, with Minsu's frantic screams demanding the madman stop chasing him. Dubo, panting heavily, wildly chased Minsu around the kitchen tables. He screamed, demanding instant punishment for the one he deemed the enemy of his future family. Noticing the giant was starting to tire because of his massive size, Minsu immediately seized the moment to counterattack. He decisively smashed a tray of eggs straight into Dubo's face and yelled, "Take this egg punishment!" Raw eggs running down his face made Dubo look even more pathetic and terrifying. Minsu added insults about him smelling like chicken crap and told him to get out of his sight. His fury peaking, Dubo grabbed a kettle and pots, throwing them wildly at Minsu. While struggling to dodge, Minsu scolded him as a psychopath for doing things that could actually kill someone. But Dubo just crazily screamed, demanding Minsu die right then and there. The situation became extremely critical when Dubo grabbed a wok full of boiling hot oil to throw. Right at that moment, the girl from the female reform center approached the kitchen door, humming happily. She casually opened the door and called out, "Hey guys, I brought the stuff you left behind." Sudden disaster struck as the boiling hot oil from Dubo's swinging wok flew straight toward the door. Dubo gasped, "No way!" in shock as he watched all that boiling oil splash right toward the poor girl who had just appeared in the doorway. "Get out of the way!" Minsu yelled decisively. Without a moment's hesitation, he rushed over and tackled the girl, using his own body as a human shield for her. The scalding hot oil splashed directly onto Minsu's back. He gritted his teeth, enduring the flesh-tearing agony as the searing liquid soaked through his shirt. The girl gasped in shock. "Huh?" as a blood-curdling scream echoed through the entire kitchen. Hearing the commotion, Yusong bolted down the hallway at blinding speed. "No! Minsu!" he screamed in sheer panic, his heart clenching with fear. Yusong blamed himself. He came here to protect his brother and absolutely couldn't let him suffer any more harm. Yusong burst straight into the infirmary, frantically asking the nurse, "Room A3, Minsu, is he here?" The nurse shushed him, telling him to keep quiet, and pointed toward a bed with drawn curtains. "Shh, he's over there on that bed." Trembling, Yusong pulled back the bamboo curtain, his mouth continuously calling his brother's name in distress. However, a cold, dry skeleton lying on the hospital bed suddenly appeared before his eyes, leaving him paralyzed with terror. "Minsu." The skeleton spoke softly in an apologetic tone. "Sorry, bro. I ended up like this in the end." Yusong collapsed beside the bed in utter despair. Minsu's laughter rang out, shattering the mournful atmosphere. It turned out the liquid splashed on him wasn't hot oil, and he was just playing a prank with the medical skeleton. Minsu gleefully explained that he almost became a real skeleton, but his smile vanished when he saw Yusong's hands shaking violently with rage. Yusong loomed over him with an overwhelming aura, making a terrified Minsu stammer apologies for taking the joke too far. However, instead of a furious outburst, Yusong unexpectedly pulled his little brother into a tight hug. Such deep brotherly love. Yusong hugged Minsu tight, his voice choking up with relief. "God, I almost had a heart attack." Minsu froze at his brother's affection, quietly returning the hug and murmuring an apology for making him worry. In the background, the nurse was furious, scolding whoever dared to mess with her skeleton model. As soon as he calmed down, Yusong roared in shock upon learning Minsu still wanted to continue volunteering with the kitchen crew. Minsu asserted it was the fastest way to earn merit points, but he also admitted he was pretty scared and hoped his brother would help him out. Minsu's eyes burned with resolve. He looked straight at his brother and demanded, "You're gonna teach me how to beat Dubo, right?" Barely escaped death and already asking to fight again. Yusong slicked his hair back, smirking dangerously. "Ha! You're really something else, ready?" Soon after, on the assembly field, the head warden seemed incredibly impressed by Yusong's new initiative. When asked about this bizarre training method, Yusong coldly explained it was an exercise designed to teach those who dare challenge authority their true place. He clearly declared, "It's called the dung beetle exercise." The head warden spared no praise for Yusong's creativity upon witnessing the inmates crawling flat, using their backs and legs to push massive boulders across the field. He wondered where these boulders came from, and received a casual reply that Yusong had brought them down from the mountain behind the facility. Crushed under the massive weight, Minsu gritted his teeth, his face distorted with exertion as he screamed in resentment. "Kang Yusong, you bastard! Can't you teach me normally?" Yusong casually adjusted his sunglasses, praised his brother for doing a great job, and announced the end of today's training. Minsu, dripping with sweat, eagerly asked, "So I can fight Dubo now, right?" But Yusong casually dumped a bucket of cold water on him. "Not yet. Now, roll it back yourself." Immediately, Minsu was forced back under a massive boulder, screaming in resentment. "Damn it! Yusong, you jerk!" He frantically pushed the boulder, cursing nonstop at this excessive torture. Only when he saw his brother was completely exhausted did Yusong finally offer some praise. "Good job. You can stop now." Minsu rejoiced and asked again if it was time for revenge against Dubo, but the answer was still a firm no. Yusong pointed to a massive concrete breakwater block and gave a cold order. Next, this gift is for you. Minsu once again fell into a living hell. He screamed in extreme agony as he was forced to push that ton-heavy block across the ground. Yusong casually adjusted his sunglasses. It's a bit crooked, but still excellent. Minsu lay flat on the ground, silently cursing his brother as a ruthless bastard and wondering when this physical torture would end. Yusong sighed, explaining that defeating someone in a completely different weight class wasn't as simple as he thought. He asserted confidently, "If you can make this thing budge even an inch, you'll definitely win." Minsu looked up in confusion. Really? But the moment he saw the next target, Minsu was completely paralyzed. Before him stood a boulder towering like a skyscraper, making him look pathetically small sitting in front of it. He was in shock, wondering if a human could even move such a thing. Meanwhile, in solitary confinement, Sejun had been locked up for a whole agonizing week. He still couldn't understand how he lost, since Minsu practically never landed a real punch on him. Reviewing his opponent's desperate attacks in his memories, Sejun bitterly told himself it was all because he got too overconfident. Sejun sat brooding and solitary, deep in thought, telling himself that if he had a chance for a rematch, he would definitely win, dismissing his previous loss as a mere accident. However, right now there was a far more pressing issue demanding his attention. Squatting over the toilet, Sejun bitterly realized the toilet paper was completely gone, and the faucet refused to run. Looking down at his already stained sleeves, he realized he had only one choice left to resolve this tragic situation. Gritting his teeth, he roughly ripped a piece of fabric right off the uniform he was wearing. Just as Sejun was about to use the rag, a roll of toilet paper was suddenly tossed in, rolling right to his feet. Yusong's sarcastic voice echoed from outside. "Stop using that trash. Use this and clean yourself up." Standing behind the bars, Yusong coldly reminded him that they still had important business to discuss. Waiting for Sejun to finish up, Yusong casually opened the door and stepped into the solitary cell. The moment the guard stepped in, Sejun suddenly lunged, attacking from behind with murderous eyes. He growled in an agitated tone, "How do you know my sister?" However, Yusong dodged the sneak attack with lightning speed, leaving Sejun in shock. He realized this guard possessed strength and reflexes far beyond his imagination. In a split second, Yusong counterattacked, pinning Sejun to the floor with ease. He expressed disappointment and mocked the opponent's cheap surprise attack. Seeing Yusong raise his fist to strike, Sejun squeezed his eyes shut, resigning himself in helplessness. Waiting forever but feeling no blow land, Sejun timidly opened his eyes and looked around in confusion. Yusong suddenly broke into a bright smile and suggested that if he was so curious, why not ask her himself? He casually held out his phone, currently connected on a call with Ga Se-min, right in front of Sejun's face. At the same time, at a cosmetic and dermatology clinic, Seaman's phone rang continuously. The caller ID clearly showed the name saved as husband candidate number 1. She picked up and answered softly, "Hello? Kang Yusong?" Seaman casually held the phone to her ear. She got straight to the point and asked, "Have you seen Sejun yet?" Recognizing the familiar voice, he stammered, Why do you have my sister's phone?" Seaman anxiously fired off questions. Had her brother gotten out of the reform center yet? Was he hurt anywhere? Suddenly, she demanded, "Yuseong! Kang Yuseong! I have a secret to tell. Can you cover your ears for me?" Yusong obediently replied, Sure," then turned around and covered his ears tight. Seaman double-checked carefully. "Sejun, did Kang Yusong cover his ears?" Receiving a nod of confirmation from her brother, she took a deep breath and suddenly screamed maniacally through the phone, "Hey, you meathead!" Seaman's fury exploded as she scolded him mercilessly. "You brainless idiot! Is your head full of ramen noodles or what? What the hell are you doing? Do you think I'm that easy to push around, you bastard? Is your head full of ramen noodles?" Seaman continued to scream about the hardships she had to endure. What a god-awful brother. Thanks to you, I had to go to jail and deal with all this garbage. Even when I got out, I had to run around trying to fix this mess. If you're gonna stay quiet, then keep your mouth shut for good. You're in jail and you're still causing trouble. Can't you think about me for once? Lift your head up, you bastard. Are you listening? Answer me, idiot. Sejun stood frozen. All the blood drained from his face at his sister's absolute fury. Meanwhile, out on the prison's assembly field, a massive boulder stood towering like an impossible challenge. Minsu was exerting all his strength, muscles bulging, drenched in sweat as he pushed hard against the rock. He gritted his teeth, using both his arms and legs to apply force in extreme agony. The other inmates watched from a distance, whispering among themselves. "Did it budge?" Another guy replied with certainty. "Nope, hasn't budged an inch." The crowd began to drift back to everyday gossip, like how dinner was going to be cod. One guy shouted at Minsu, "Hey Minsu, give it up!" They started discussing the day Sejun would be released and expressing concern about a new battle about to break out. One guy wondered about Minsu's goal in trying to move this boulder and was told that if he could do it, he would challenge Dubo. "I really hope he doesn't fight Dubo. There are a lot of tough guys in this prison, but Dubo is the true apex predator. Just one hit from his right arm, and anyone is practically finished. Just look at how Changsu was destroyed. That tells you everything." The inmates began to fear Minsu would meet the same tragic end. Despite the warnings, Minsu was still frantically putting all his strength into the giant boulder. He gritted his teeth and roared, "Damn it! I'm going to move this no matter what!" At that same moment, in the solitary cell, Ga-semin's fury showed no signs of stopping. She screamed through the phone, "I raised you so carefully, and this is the idiot you turned into. You can't even recognize who's trying to help you, and you're just barking nonsense." Seaman reminded Sejun that she had gone through hell to find someone to help, yet he went and picked a fight with that very person. She harshly cursed him out. "Just sit there and grow moss, you idiot. If you draw attention when you get out, I'll tear you apart, you bastard." Unable to endure the scolding any longer, Sejun decisively hit the button to end the call. On the other end of the line, Seaman was stunned. "What? He dares to hang up on me? He really has a death wish." Sejun was definitely in deep trouble this time. She regretted not having the chance to tell her brother to be careful. Right then, a nurse timidly peeked in and announced that the doctor had heard all of her profanities and was waiting to see her, leaving Seaman to let out an embarrassed, "Ah." Yusung casually took his phone back and asked, "Call over?" Sejun sat slumped on the floor, sighing in deep exhaustion. "No, just a little dizzy." He looked up at Yusung and asked again to confirm his relationship with his sister. Upon receiving confirmation that Yusung was Minsu's older brother, Sejun fell into deep thought. "So you're the one who taught him how to fight, right?" After a moment of thought, Sejun looked straight at Yusung with a resolute gaze and declared, "I'll do whatever you say, so teach me too, how to fight." Meanwhile, in the prison cafeteria, the atmosphere was more chaotic than ever. The kitchen crew lackeys were panicking because food kept burning, causing the whole team to get constantly punished. They feared that if this continued, they would all get kicked out of the kitchen crew. Someone wished out loud that Minsu was here to carry the load, but was instantly shot down with the fact that Minsu was the source of all their troubles. Ever since that horrifying battle that day, Kang Dubo, the proud kitchen boss, had completely collapsed. Dubo sat hugging his knees in the corner of the kitchen, his face blank, his hand subconsciously drawing circles on the floor while he muttered in despair, "I'm finished. It's all over." Minsu suddenly pushed the door open and walked into the kitchen with an eager look. He clearly declared, "Kitchen helper here to save the day." The kitchen crew lackeys panicked seeing the troublemaker return. They screamed, asking if Minsu had a death wish since he was the one who drove Dubo crazy. Dubo looked up with dull eyes, continuously muttering Minsu's name with simmering rage. Instantly, the kitchen boss shot up, looming toward Minsu with an overwhelming aura that made the atmosphere incredibly tense. Minsu unexpectedly halted the fury with a highly provocative question. "Dubo, do you know why women don't like you?" The question hit right where it hurt, making the giant freeze. He curiously demanded the reason why he wasn't popular. Minsu lowered his head and stayed silent for a moment. Then he decisively delivered a venomous insult. "Because you're incredibly ugly." "Ha ha." Dubo's face completely deformed. He gritted his teeth, trapped in absolute madness after being directly insulted. Dubo roared maniacally, "I'll kill you!" Dubo is tripping again, guys. His lackeys standing by could only hold their heads in terror at Minsu's recklessness. They were certain a gruesome murder scene was about to happen right here in this kitchen. Dubo lunged into an attack like he wanted to eat his opponent alive. He screamed, asserting that every terrible thing that happened to him was caused by Minsu. However, the younger boy kept adding fuel to the fire, mockingly asking why Dubo was blaming him for his ugly appearance, leaving the crowd astonished at his insane audacity. Instead of facing him directly, Minsu began a chase around the kitchen tables, infuriating Dubo even more. He casually refused the guy's demands to come back and continually threw out challenging taunts. The lackeys could only watch as Minsu showcased incredible speed to dodge the heavy attacks from the out-of-control kitchen boss. Dubo roared in helplessness. He put all his strength into a punch directed at Minsu, vowing to crush him instantly. Dubo's ton-heavy punch slammed into an iron cabinet, but Minsu had already quickly dodged. He laughed gleefully, mocking his opponent.
Heh heh heh, idiot! Do you have no brain? How did you fall for the trap again?
Seeing Dubo's right arm firmly stuck in the wreckage, Dubo still rushed forward madly, but Minsu had calculated this in advance. He decisively grabbed the kitchen boss's massive arm, making him gasp in shock.
Huh?
Minsu roared in peak excitement.
No!
I act after thinking things through carefully. You've fallen right into my plan. He poured all his strength into the deciding blow and shouted the name of his technique, Iron Fecal Punch. That move sounds pretty rank, guys. While the battle in the kitchen was reaching its climax, Yu Seong was still doing his best to win over the head warden with a private feast right in the cafeteria. Amidst an elegantly arranged setting with candles and wine, he introduced with flair, I prepared this dish especially for you, Director. The warden seemed quite pleased with the atmosphere. Yu Seong solemnly lifted the cloche, introducing the dish as a special Alaska pollock stew. Even though it was actually just a simple braised fish dish, the warden was so excited his face deformed, unable to believe he was getting to enjoy such a luxurious meal in this hellhole. Not stopping there, Yu Seong went on to show off his mixology skills by blending 2 types of fruit drinks together. He expertly shook the shaker and introduced a special drink called the Hybrid Flavor Star. Taking just a sip, the warden was in ecstasy as if he were in heaven, clearly tasting the harmony between refreshing peach and sweet grape. Yu Seong gave a subtle smile and invited the old man to deeply enjoy the dinner unfolding right before his eyes. From the dining table, the warden eagerly watched the fight between Dubo and Minsu through the glass window. Dubo roared arrogantly, seeing his opponent had nowhere left to run. Run some more! Why stand still? He swung his ton-heavy fist straight at Minsu, roaring to ask if the kid wanted to be executed instantly for daring to use his bare hands to block his attack. However, the smile on Dubo's face vanished when he realized his right arm was locked tight by an incredibly masterful technique. He realized in shock that he completely couldn't move, frantically wondering where this brat had learned these moves. Minsu seized the opportunity, landing rapid-fire punches to his opponent's face, making Dubo furious. The kitchen boss fought back crazily, roaring a challenge if Minsu could overcome his raw muscle power, then diving into a brutal close-quarters brawl. Flashing back a few days, lying crushed under the giant boulder, Minsu tiredly asked why he had to do this torturous exercise, instead of using the strategy of backing his opponent into a corner like he did with Seijun. Yu Seong coldly reminded him to think carefully before speaking, because the weight class difference between him and Seijun was only 1 tier, which was why cornering him could succeed. But with Dubo, the physical difference was too vast, up to 2, maybe even 3 weight classes above Minsu. Yu Seong warned that Minsu was the one who needed to pray he didn't get cornered by Dubo. When Minsu gasped out a question asking if his brother planned to help him bulk up to match his opponent's weight class, Yu Seong scolded him for being an idiot since that was impossible in a short time. Muscles don't just sprout like mushrooms. He unexpectedly posed a scientific question about how Minsu could move boulders heavier than his own body. The answer was the principle of leverage. He explained that human limbs also operated on this principle. Yu Seong asserted that if Minsu could become the lever that moved that giant boulder, he could also push back a guy like Dubo. Back to the real battle, Minsu was bracing himself in a head-on clash, blocking the giant arm of the kitchen boss. Dubo was stunned, eyes wide, not understanding why a small kid like this wouldn't budge an inch against his strength. Minsu unleashed a relentless rain of blows on his opponent. He screamed in resentment for all the suffering he had endured all this time. Watching the scene through the cafeteria window, Yu Seong asked the warden if he was enjoying the show. The warden admitted it was quite entertaining, but thought the outcome was too predictable. The old man pointed out that Dubo didn't even feel pain from those tiny fists, while Minsu was clearly starting to show exhaustion. He asserted firmly that in the end, no one could ignore such a massive weight class difference. Seeing the warden still skeptical of his little brother's abilities, Yusong unexpectedly made a bold proposal. Then, let's make a bet. I'll bet on that kid, Minsu. The warden paused mid-bite, smirking maliciously. A bet? Sounds great. You really like reckless gambles, don't you? Yusong gently pushed his glasses up, calmly confirming, exactly. He wanted to use reality to test the hypothesis that attacks to the face wouldn't work due to the weight class difference. In theory, the basic stance in combat martial arts is always designed to provide maximum protection for the face and head. The reason is that the head and face are where the most vulnerable parts of the human body are concentrated. While Minsu was still pushing his assault, Dubo, despite taking continuous hits, still roared arrogantly. He challenged, "Keep punching, that's just a scratch." He had no idea that many fatal weak points were concentrated right on his head. From his eyes, forehead, nose, philtrum, to his temples. And among those, the most critical target was the chin. An accurate punch to the chin will severely concuss the brain and inner ear, instantly scrambling the opponent's sense of balance. Minsu poured all his strength into a devastating strike aimed straight at the target, leaving Dubo completely dizzy, his eyes rolling back as he lost consciousness. Aim right for the chin, one hit is all it takes. Although weight class is an extremely important factor in amateur fights, in the end, professional technique is always what secures absolute victory. Minsu roared, unleashing the deciding blow that completely deformed the giant's face under the weight of the strike. Minsu coldly looked at his staggering opponent and bid farewell. Dubo, goodbye. Goodbye. In his delirium from the painful blow, Dubo suddenly saw the phantom of his dream girl smiling and waving a loving goodbye to him. He screamed out in sheer panic, "Wife! No! Don't go, honey!" His entire beautiful future of a grand wedding, a gentle wife, and the young children he always fantasized about suddenly vanished into thin air with this fateful fall. Dubo lay motionless on the floor, still desperately calling out the name of his dream girl in his delirium. "Don't go!" The kitchen crew lackeys froze, unable to believe their boss had lost to a rookie like Minsu. Even the head warden roared in shock because he had lost the bet. He stared at Yusong, demanding, "How did you guess so accurately?" Yusong casually adjusted his glasses, flashing a knowing smile and saying it was just a hunch. The warden smirked in amusement, then turned and walked away, not forgetting to tell Yusong to start thinking about his prize for winning. Minsu sat slumped on his opponent's chest, panting from exhaustion after the incredibly grueling battle. He accidentally discovered an envelope with a heart sticker lying under Dubo's hand. Minsu calmly read the writing on the outside. "To the head of room." He gasped, asking himself, "Wait, a love letter addressed to Seijun?" The lackeys confirmed that the letter was originally meant for Seijun, but Dubo mistakenly thought Minsu was the recipient, which was why he went crazy trying to kill him. The ironic truth left Minsu paralyzed. So all the pain, all the times he had to push that giant boulder until he was exhausted, was all because of this madman's stupid misunderstanding. Minsu screamed maniacally, launching into a flurry of punches on the unconscious Dubo to vent his anger. The lackeys had to struggle to pull him off, stopping him from beating up someone who could no longer defend themselves. In a strictly guarded, restricted area, the atmosphere grew incredibly tense. Inside a dark room, a mysterious figure was casually playing cards and drinking wine, discussing the stalled selection of the next candidate. He expressed concern as the strongest fighters, like Seijun and now Dubo, were being eliminated one by one. The mysterious figure doubtfully wondered if Minsu was truly strong enough to defeat Dubo, who was considered the strongest in Gangyo. "The top two strongest are gone. What do we do now?" the figure mused as he shuffled the cards in his hands. He wondered if there was anyone left in this godforsaken place qualified to catch their eye. The first name mentioned was someone who sent shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it. Lee Kang-min. He was the leader of a notorious gang in eastern Daehyun, a maniac who frequently used brutal force to establish his absolute authority. Lee Kang-min stood tall amidst a crowd, laughing arrogantly at the pain of the defeated opponents at his feet. But the list of potential candidates didn't stop there. The second name mentioned was Ha Seong Cheon, a member of the maintenance crew. Unlike the thuggish appearance of the others, Xiang Cheon always appeared wearing a welding mask, his sharp eyes full of intense focus on his work. The mysterious figure casually poured more wine. He understood why a leader like Li Kangmin was on the list, but was incredibly confused as to why someone who wasn't even a boss, like Ha Xiang Cheon, was chosen as a candidate. Jisoo, aren't you going to pick someone? Add another person to make the game fun. The one holding the #1 spot at this Gangyo Reform Center was none other than Im Jisoo. He lightly ran his fingers over a pile of poker chips, his eyes revealing deep calculation. Jisoo admitted he originally planned to sit this round out, but after hearing about the recent upheavals, his curiosity had truly been piqued. With a meaningful smile, Im Jisoo decisively made his final choice. I nominate Minsu as a candidate. After the brawl, Dubo was thrown into solitary confinement. Thanks to that, Minsu got the chance to take over his job, but the price was that he had to work in the kitchen as a condition of the trade. Watching the flames burst from the wok, Minsu screamed in frustration. What kind of reward is this? While he was swamped with work, the kitchen crew lackeys kept causing hilariously disastrous problems. They cheered excitedly, Minsu, Minsu, look at this, it's amazing! The stupidity of the kitchen grunts seemed to know no bounds. One guy screamed in amazement, seeing rice overflow from a pot. Wow, the rice is multiplying. When asked how much rice he put in, he casually replied, a full pot, leaving everyone to just laugh hysterically at the rice cooker erupting like a volcano. Not stopping there, another guy proudly showed off his culinary art, a crab placed on the back of an octopus. The peak disaster was when an electric kettle was placed directly on a stove burner until it was burnt black. His naive excuse was, well, you told me to boil water. Minsu completely broke down. He screamed in despair, you idiots, stop it! Dubo, please come back! Missing Dubo more than a lover. Right then, the female inmates appeared again with boxes of supplies, cheerfully greeting them and asking about Dubo's absence. The receiving area instantly descended into chaos as the guys fought each other to help the girls. Shouts of, lift it higher, and give me the box echoed everywhere, making an exasperated Minsu tell himself, those idiots are at it again. Unexpectedly, the girl Minsu had saved from the boiling oil approached. She called out softly, hey, Minsu! While Minsu was still confused, she shyly spoke up. Thank you for last time. You saved me from getting oil poured on me. Minsu just laughed it off, saying the oil wasn't even that hot then, so it was no big deal. However, to Minsu's utter surprise, she suddenly held out an envelope sealed with a bright red heart. Minsu took the letter with a highly skeptical look. Ah, what's with all the fuss? Just give it to Sejun if that's the issue. Upon hearing Sejun's name, the girl's face flushed bright red from embarrassment. She ran away, not forgetting to shout back that it was a secret. Minsu stood frozen, looking at the words to Minsu written on the envelope. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. Our boy is officially spoken for, guys. A dreamy vision of the future suddenly flashed in his mind. A small house on a green meadow, where he lived happily with a gentle wife and young children. Minsu's face flushed completely red. He stared silently at the first love letter he had ever received in his life. The letter began with deeply touching confessions. Dear Minsu, a few days ago, right at the moment when that boiling oil was about to splash on me, I thought everything was over. You were the one who saved my life. However, the truth was that the girl had been secretly observing him and knew about him long before that. The first time she saw Minsu was through the gaps in the barbed wire fence separating the two camps. It was an afternoon when she was taking a walk after meals, and a shocking sight suddenly caught her eye. A blue trash can lid had slammed straight into a bully's face. Witnessing that decisive and powerful action, the young girl could only stand rooted to the spot, her eyes wide with amazement and admiration. That day was the epic battle between Minsu and Sejun. She was completely mesmerized by his eyes burning with madness and resilience, a wild beauty like a honey badger that feared nothing. The moment she heard the crowd screaming Minsu's name, she carved that name deep into her heart. From that second on, her heart never stopped fluttering as she breathlessly followed his every step. To look her absolute prettiest and hand-deliver this letter to Minsu, she had to prepare incredibly painstakingly given the prison's sparse conditions. She meticulously used the heat from a stove burner to heat up an iron hair clip, curling each strand of hair herself until it was perfect. When an older cellmate suggested makeup, Even though they had absolutely no cosmetics here, they found an incredibly creative solution. By soaking soapy water onto colorful magazine pages and rubbing them vigorously, she cleverly utilized the printing ink to make DIY blush and lipstick for herself. One-of-a-kind handmade cosmetics. Sarah carefully applied the DIY tint to her lips, silently hoping this look was enough to give her the courage to confess. Her cellmates couldn't stop praising her. "Wow, the color really pops. Sarah, you look so pretty. Why haven't you done this before?" Sarah could only blush shyly. "Stop teasing me, Unease." She silently wondered if she really looked beautiful in his eyes today. Back in the cell, Minsu sat in a daze, reading the letter with its parting message. "Next time we meet, you have to give me an answer." His cellmates instantly surrounded him, screaming in pure jealousy. "Traitor! Death penalty! You got a girlfriend before any of us? You're super happy you got a letter, right?" The longtime singles club strongly dislikes this development. Minsu awkwardly admitted he felt happy but was also deeply confused. "I've only ever gotten letters from my mom or from Sejun." Faced with the crowd's curiosity, he shoved the letter forward. "Here, read it yourselves." The contents of the letter overflowed with Sarah's affection. "I like you. You like me too, right? Thank you for saving me, but please don't get hurt. If you get hurt, my heart will break too. You're the only one in my heart." Meanwhile, at the warden's office, Yusong knocked on the door to report. "Director, this is Sergeant Kang." He stepped into the room in a strict military posture, declaring clearly, "I heard you were looking for me." The director smiled, noting that Yusong had been here for 3 months. He endlessly praised Yusong's incredible resume, from getting into the military academy early to graduating top of his sergeant class at lightning speed. He smugly thought he was truly lucky to have a talent like him at this center. Yusong clearly promised to dedicate himself fully to the director and the country, but inside he was calculating. "I need to build trust with him to find a way to increase Minsu's points." However, the atmosphere instantly grew chilling when the director leaned in close to his ear, smirking and revealing he had seen something interesting on the CCTV. "Are you and him blood brothers?" Yusong froze, cold sweat starting to pour beneath his glasses. The director widened his eyes, interrogating him with a perverse and threatening tone about what their relationship was. The overwhelming tension left Yusong frozen, unable to react in time. The scene shifts to the shower room, where Minsu was struggling under the shower head. He looked at the tiny sliver of soap, now just a bright green crumb in his palm, and sighed. "It's even smaller than before. How am I supposed to wash with this?" Suddenly, a hand held out a full bottle of shampoo, leaving him bewildered. "What's this?" Minsu stared in shock at the shampoo bottle in his hand. He couldn't believe such a luxury item could make it into this reform center. He turned around to look at the person who had handed it to him. It was an inmate with long, romantic blonde hair, possessing an incredibly calm and mysterious face, standing right there under the shower. To save Minsu from the reform center, Yuseong knew he absolutely had to hide the fact that they were biological brothers. Ever since he was adopted, no one knew about this blood tie. Facing the director's probing gaze, Yusong sweated bullets, wondering if the old man had caught on to something. The director leaned in close, smiling maliciously, demanding to know what kind of illicit affair the two were having. Yusong silently told himself he couldn't let the old man find out. He frantically searched for an excuse to cover it up. Unexpectedly, the director burst out laughing. Could it be a master and a student? The old man smugly asserted he had seen everything and assumed Yusong was secretly teaching Minsu how to fight. He was certain the reason Yusong dared to make that bet was because he knew his student would win. The old man threw a few shadow punches excitedly. "Are you really good at fighting?" Yusong quickly played along, saying that because Minsu wanted to get stronger, he had offered to help. Yusong breathed a quiet sigh of relief because the old man had misunderstood in a way that benefited him. The director warned Yusong not to get too close to the trash, then permitted him to go prepare for the outdoor activities. Watching Yusong's back, the old man muttered about Minsu's desire to become a real man and praised the kid as interesting. However, the moment Yusong left, the director immediately picked up the phone and gave an order to his subordinate. "Investigate Sergeant Kang's background. I have a feeling we're going to find something." Receiving confirmation from the other end of the line, the old man smirked calculatingly. This is starting to get interesting. Meanwhile, in solitary confinement, Sejun silently pondered over his sister successfully escaping the reform center. Suddenly, the sound of sobbing echoing through the hallway caught his attention. Following the sound, Yusong found Dubo curled up in a corner crying pitifully. "It's so unfair. It's all Minsu's fault." Yusong casually walked over and stated that Dubo getting dumped wasn't Minsu's fault. Dubo screamed in resentment. "What does a guard know? Because of Minsu, my life is ruined. Minsu stole my wife and kids." Dubo is way too delusional. Yusong coldly corrected him, saying the head of room A mentioned in the letter wasn't Minsu, it was Sejun. He pointed out that Dubo made a huge mistake not knowing the room head had changed. Instantly, Dubo's attitude flipped. He wailed apologies to Minsu for blaming him wrongly, then shifted his murderous hatred onto Sejun. Yusong smirked, telling Dubo not to jump to conclusions, then showed him a photo of Seaman with Sejun on his phone. Dubo was shocked to realize his goddess Seaman was right next to Sejun. Dubo screamed crazily, not understanding why his goddess would be so close to that bastard Sejun. He cursed out the superficial world and swore to kill Sejun for stealing his dream girl. However, Yusong poured a bucket of cold water on him by revealing they were biological siblings, and Sejun was Seaman's younger brother. Dubo's face twisted into a terrifying smile as he realized Sejun was actually his future brother-in-law. He grabbed the bars, screaming in excitement, leaving Yusong completely speechless. From inside his solitary cell, Sejun flew into a rage, screaming, "Who are you calling your brother-in-law? You pig! Shut your mouth!" Sejun is so aggressive. Despite the hostility, Dubo kept trying to suck up, promising to cook lots of delicious food for his brother-in-law since they were soon going to be family. Yusong sighed and walked away amidst the noisy argument about Dubo daring to have thoughts about Seaman and reminding Sejun to speak nicely for the sake of his future nieces and nephews. Setting Minsu's issues aside for a moment, Yusong turned his attention to a strictly guarded, restricted area. He silently told himself he needed to investigate the dark secret the director was intentionally hiding at this reform facility. Yusong told himself that if he leaked this to the press, it would only be a minor scandal. But to completely bring down the president, he needed a more fatal weakness. He realized that even as a guard, he still couldn't step foot inside this strictly guarded, restricted area. Yusong was certain something shady was being hidden behind that closed door. Peeking through the crack in the door, he was horrified to witness guards carrying a prisoner out on a stretcher, his face bruised and covered in blood. Yusong shuddered, wondering what terrible things had happened behind that door. His eyes suddenly stopped when he saw another prisoner quietly step into the restricted area, wearing a bright red uniform instead of the standard gray. Yusong froze, silently resolving to investigate the existence of these men in red. Meanwhile, in the shower area, Minsu had just finished washing his hair. He spoke up to thank the guy who lent him the shampoo. "It's been a long time since I got to wash my hair properly like this." However, taking a closer look at the person across from him, Minsu suddenly froze as he noticed something unusual. He pointed in shock at the mysterious blonde man's clothes and questioned him. "Wait, Hyung, is your uniform red?" Minsu couldn't help but be suspicious seeing this romantic-looking, muscular man not wearing any rank insignia on his chest. He asked cautiously, "And also, why don't you have a rank badge?" Over in the solitary ward, a voice full of suspicion echoed in the empty hallway. "Why'd you let him win so easily?" Dubo couldn't believe that Sejun had lost to someone like Minsu. Sitting quietly behind the bars, Sejun admitted he had been too overconfident, whereas Minsu showed up with an incredibly meticulous strategy. Dubo also bitterly admitted he had fallen into a set trap while trying to play with his prey. Sejun realized that this victory would definitely draw the attention of the top dogs onto Minsu. He asserted it was already happening. Minsu had even caused an internal split in the kitchen crew and might get chosen as a replacement candidate for them. Hearing this, Sejun smirked with utter disdain. With his eyes glowing with murderous intent and his fists clenched so tight they trembled, he firmly asserted that he was the only true candidate. Sejun swore to prove his capabilities, climb to the very top, and pay Minsu back for this humiliation at any cost. Meanwhile, in the locker room, the mysterious guy with romantic blonde hair and bulging muscles who had lent Minsu shampoo officially introduced himself. He casually gave his name as Im Jisoo and confirmed Minsu's identity via the name tag on his chest. Before Minsu could even gather his thoughts, Jisoo unexpectedly reached out and patted his head in a highly patronizing manner. Minsu asked the reason with annoyance, but Jisoo just laughed mockingly that his head was smaller than he thought and questioned him. "You won being that small?" Even though he was extremely annoyed, Minsu held back and let it go out of gratitude for borrowing the shampoo earlier. Jisoo looked straight into Minsu's eyes, issuing a mysterious declaration of war. "This time I came looking for you, but next time you'll have to come looking for me." He warned that the road ahead would not be easy, but he would always be there waiting. Watching Jisoo's back disappear down the hallway, Minsu could only scratch his head in bewilderment, not understanding what this weird guy was implying. The segment closed with an image of an incredibly bizarre pot of ramen noodles, with fish heads poking up out of the broth. "Who put fish in this sacred pot of ramen?" One of the kitchen crew lackeys screamed in horror looking at the steaming pot. "Wouldn't adding something delicious make it taste better?" He casually picked up some noodles to eat, but suddenly noticed everyone was staring at him with weird expressions. Minsu asked in confusion, "What? Why aren't you eating and just staring at me?" Before he could finish his sentence, a massive dark shadow suddenly enveloped him from behind, accompanied by a chilling aura. It was Kang Dubo, looming there with his giant hands raised high as if about to deliver a fatal blow, leaving Minsu frozen in terror. Minsu's eyes widened, sweating profusely, thinking he was going to die right there at the hands of this madman. However, instead of throwing a punch, Kang Dubo suddenly dropped to his knees, bowing his head in a tragic apology. "I'm sorry, Minsu. Dubo's time as a boss is over." The kitchen boss sobbed and confessed he had mixed up the letter, which led to him unjustly torturing Minsu all this time. "I mistook the letter and ended up torturing you. I'm sorry." Beat up the wrong guy. How embarrassing. Dubo painfully explained that Seijin had become his brother-in-law, which meant he couldn't exact revenge for Minsu anymore. Faced with that sincere apology, Minsu gently reached his hand out, his voice softening. "What are you talking about? I accept your apology. Now get up. Let's eat ramen together." Dubo choked up with emotion seeing Minsu not only forgive him, but invite him to eat. You really forgive me? And you're even giving me ramen?" The lackeys standing by also laughed happily, teasing Dubo that he didn't need to worry because Minsu already had a love letter from another girl anyway. Hearing that, Dubo's face instantly twisted in fury and he roared maniacally, "Minsu, you bastard! You dare lay your eyes on my second wife too?" A chaotic chase started up again, Minsu running for his life while scolding the guy as a jerk. Though he was out of breath, his heart was filled with joy and excitement, because tomorrow was the day he would hand-deliver his reply letter to Sarah. However, life is not a dream. Minsu stood paralyzed in front of the prisoner transport bus, his eyes showing absolute shock and disappointment. He bitterly questioned himself internally. Why? Why did things turn out like this? Minsu frantically threw a tantrum on the floor, rolling around. "I don't want to go volunteer. I have to go see Sarah and give her the letter." Girls are priority number one, right, guys? Ignoring his fierce protests, he was still forced onto the bus because this job offered a ton of merit points to get released sooner. As soon as he stepped foot onto the new volunteer site, a group of strangers appeared, blocking his way with an incredibly arrogant attitude. A short guy with a shrewd face and crooked teeth approached, issuing a highly patronizing invitation. "Be my underling, I'll let you open a fried chicken shop." Minsu smirked in disdain, turning to say to Moon Hyunjun, "Moon Hyunjun, look, here's another guy babbling the exact same nonsense you used to." This dismissive action bruised the lackeys' egos, and they screamed furiously to defend their boss. "How dare you call our boss a scammer? Do you have any idea how much money he's made from his business?" A tall guy unexpectedly grabbed Minsu by the collar and hoisted him up. He looked at him with eyes full of contempt and challenge. "Are you sure you really took down Gasejun and Dubo? You look weak as hell!" Instantly, the shout of a fake officer rang out, shattering the tense atmosphere. "Stop right there! Are you punks trying to fight again?" The man angrily scolded the inmates, yelling that they still hadn't come to their senses even on volunteer day, only knowing how to talk with their fists. Seeing the official get mad, the short guy Park Tae-ho quickly used a cowardly tactic to shift the blame. "Sir, we were just minding our own business. They started it." Wang Hee-wook, the guy with a brain-shaped scar on his head, shot back in shock. "What are you talking about? You're the one who started it." However, before he could finish his sentence, a devastating punch from the fake officer smashed straight into Wang Hee-wook's face, sending him tumbling. The fake officer frantically rained blows down on Wang Hee-wook, shouting unreasonably, "You little brat! I never liked your face from the start." Witnessing that unprovoked violence, Min-soo stood frozen in shock. What? Is he just gonna attack someone like that? Could he be on their side? While Taeho's lackeys laughed smugly, Wang Hee-wook could only cry and beg for mercy and pain. "I didn't do anything, please spare me." Luckily, Yu-sung arrived in time and firmly grabbed the fake officer's arm to stop him. "That's enough. We need to leave right now." Being reprimanded, the fake officer scratched his head with an awkward laugh, making excuses that he went a bit too far because these kids were too stubborn. Yu-sung clearly ordered everyone to get on the bus to start the trip. He kindly checked on Wang Hee-wook's condition and then sighed in deep exhaustion. Yu-sung glanced at Min-soo with eyes full of suspicion. "You weren't planning on attacking that officer earlier, were you?" Min-soo turned back with a mischievous smile, winking meaningfully at his brother. "Come on, bro. Don't you trust your little brother?" The bus began rolling out of the prison gates, taking the delinquent teens to the volunteer site. Inside the bus, Moon Hyun-jun cheered excitedly. "Wow, smelling this makes it feel like we're on a school trip, right?" In contrast to that excitement, Min-soo was deep in thought about the fake officer from earlier. But before Min-soo could answer, an overwhelmingly foul stench suddenly hit him. Park Tae-ho casually propped his stinking feet right next to Min-soo's face and sneered. "You talking about this smell?" Min-soo roared in fury. "Damn it! Get your stinking feet away, you bastard!" These stinking feet are a biological weapon. However, Tae-ho continued to casually provoke him. He leaned on the two burly guys beside him and declared, "If you got a problem, try fighting my underlings here. Hey. Tae-ho smugly asserted that even if Sejun were here, he wouldn't stand a chance against his gang. Min-soo and Tae-ho both froze simultaneously when they saw a figure looming closer. A chilling atmosphere enveloped the bus cabin as Sejun unexpectedly appeared, his long hair covering half his face. Sejun stared straight at the noisy crowd and dropped a highly authoritative command. "Put your feet down." Faced with the aura of the former Room A boss, the two burly guys were so terrified they broke into a cold sweat. They hastily pulled their feet back and mumbled, "Oh, okay. All right," Min-soo asked in surprise. "You got out of solitary?" "Hey, man." Sejun didn't reply. He just quietly sat down in the seat right next to Min-soo. The younger boy could only sigh in exasperation, having to face his old rival again in this situation. The bus full of delinquents continued speeding down the long road. The bus came to a stop in front of a nursing home. A middle-aged man in an elegant suit greeted them warmly. "Thank you all for traveling so far to get here. I hope this volunteer trip brings positive changes to the kids from the Reform Center." Yu-sung politely shook the director's hand, expressing his hope that the students could be of help to the elderly. Meanwhile, the inmates were treated to glasses of ice-cold soda. The teens teared up, exclaiming as they drank, "Wow, it's been so long since I had cola. This is truly the taste of money." While enjoying their drinks, one guy suddenly cheered. "Oh, a woman!" The whole group went wild. "Where's the girl? Point her out to me." However, their hopes were quickly crushed when they only saw a group of elderly women in wheelchairs. The delinquents were thoroughly disappointed. "What the hell? It's all old ladies?" One guy clicked his tongue. "Well, old ladies are women too." "So boring. Not a single young person here. Just old people." Suddenly, another guy shouted, pointing forward, "No, over there, a young woman." "Is she a nurse?" Sejun, who was casually drinking water, suddenly froze when he saw the familiar figure. It was Ga Se-min. She was gently asking an elderly woman, "Grandma, are you cold? Let me get you a blanket." Se-min is the nation's muse. Recognizing his sister, Sejun was so shocked he spat the entire mouthful of water right out in utter disbelief. Sejun was paralyzed, unable to comprehend why his sister was here as a volunteer. Soon after, the volunteer activities officially kicked off with a foot-washing ceremony for the elderly. An old woman looked at Wang Hee-wook and sighed emotionally. My goodness, you look exactly like my husband when he was young. Hearing that, the guy with the scar on his head immediately tried to flatter her. He must have been very handsome then. However, the old woman instantly warned him. Student, don't cross the line. Camera shutters clicked continuously to capture these humanitarian moments for the report. Amidst the stifling atmosphere, Minsu wiped his sweat and sighed in deep exasperation. He just hoped this volunteer event would end quickly. Right then, an old man spoke up with a request. Young man, please wash my feet too, Minsu quickly replied. Yes, sir. However, when he looked down at the old man's bare feet, he was horrified to realize they were in terrible condition, with cracked, peeling, and blackened skin. Minsu thought to himself that this old man must have suffered a lot for his feet to look like they were rotting. He endured it, meticulously washing every toe exactly as instructed. Seeing there was a lot of dead skin, Minsu asked kindly, Sir, do you feel more comfortable now? The response to that enthusiasm was the malicious smile of the short Park Tae-ho in disguise. He laughed uproariously, happily admitting that having the itchy spot on his foot scratched felt absolutely amazing. The short Park Tae-ho didn't stop his outrageous antics. He casually placed his wet, gross foot right on Minsu's face and sneered. Hey, want to work under me? As a foot washer! A wave of fury erupted, making Minsu want to explode. Just as Minsu was about to snap, reporters behind them were continuously snapping photos to capture the volunteer moments, prompting the guard to issue a warning against fighting. Tai-ho's lackey stood by, laughing smugly. They mocked Minsu for being an idiot and claimed that even guys like Sejun or Dubo were nothing to be scared of. Minsu gritted his teeth, swallowing his anger, telling himself he absolutely couldn't cause trouble right now. In the peaceful environment of the nursing home, Saemin was carefully tending to an old woman in a wheelchair. She gently pointed toward the flower garden. Grandma, those flowers over there are so pretty, aren't they? Seeing Sejun also silently pushing an old man by, she spoke up to ask, Everyone else is busy volunteering and you're just slacking off, huh? Moving away from the elderly for a moment, the two went elsewhere to talk. Seaman thoughtfully brought up the reason both of them had to go to reform school. They had beaten up a perverted old man. Seaman sighed softly, admitting, That was our mistake. I truly regret it. She believed they should have just reported that old man for sexual harassment instead of intervening themselves and ending up in reform school. Watching the elderly peacefully enjoying the scenery, Seaman realized not all old people were as evil as that man from years ago. She reminded Sejun that one day they would also grow old and then asked, What kind of old people do you think we'll become? A tough question for the youth. Seeing Sejun maintain his sullen expression, she could only advise her brother to think about it at least once. Seaman stood up to push the wheelchair inside because it was starting to get cold, leaving an open question about Sejun's future. Lunchtime at the nursing home was extremely lively. The kitchen staff hurried to prepare meals for everyone. All right, everyone take one portion. Minsu and his fellow inmates were also busy helping out. Sir, it's time to eat. Grandma, eat a lot. Remember to chew well. Minsu was so busy he couldn't even catch a break, constantly hearing calls for, Give her another piece, she's so hungry. However, that humanitarian scene was instantly ruined by Park Tae-ho's despicable actions. He casually held a sausage high in the air, teasing a starving old woman for his own amusement. Should I give it to you or not? But it's mine. Witnessing the poor old woman crying and begging for food in humiliation, Minsu screamed furiously. Hey, you bastard! What the hell are you doing to her? Just as Minsu's anger reached its peak, a food tray suddenly crashed down on his head from behind. Park Tae-ho and his lackeys laughed despicably. Oops, my hand slipped. Minsu roared in fury. You bastard! You want me to accidentally spill something on you too? Moon Hyun-jun trembled, and Wang Hee-wook had to struggle to hold Minsu back from jumping into a brawl. Calm down. Don't murder him here. The guard's shout rang out. What's going on now? Minsu, are you trying to cause trouble again? Minsu pointed indignantly at the guy who had just wronged him, but the guard just coldly snapped, He said it was an accident. Are you really trying to cause more trouble? Minsu could only stand there in utter helplessness. while the Sector C lackeys laughed arrogantly for successfully humiliating a guy from Sector A. Park Tae-ho smirked sarcastically, saying it turned out the guys from Sector A weren't so scary after all. He began lecturing on the rules of the Reform Center. Ranks here were divided by the severity of the crimes, not fighting ability. Sector A was for murder, B was for assault, and C was for theft and fraud. Tae-ho casually admitted he was a fraudster and asserted that whether inside or out in society, money was what decided everything. He pointed to the news on TV about a conglomerate chairman who had just been bailed out, smugly claiming that money could buy the protection of the police and the law. He held up a coin and declared arrogantly, "If they have power, then we'll use money to buy that power. We have plenty of money, right?" The lackeys praised Tae-ho endlessly, believing that even the guys from Sector A would have to kneel before the power of money. Meanwhile, Moon Hyun-jun was still diligently and carefully tending to the elderly. In the shower area, a group of Tae-ho's lackeys was secretly gathered, smoking. One guy bragged smugly that he had just stolen a pack of cigarettes from an old man's pocket earlier. They exhaled smoke while complaining about the filthy job of cleaning up waste. One guy coldly ordered to just spray the bathing old man with water randomly and drag him out to get it over with. The poor old man trembled, crying for help under the scalding water. "It's too hot! Please stop!" At that time, Wang Hee-wook had just finished cleaning the toilets and excitedly headed toward the showers, thinking that cleaning might just be his true calling. However, the moment he opened the door, he was horrified to witness the Sector C lackeys casually smoking and abusing the old man. Wang Hee-wook's face instantly transformed, showing absolute fury at their inhumane behavior. Wang Hee-wook rushed over in a panic to the old man who had collapsed, screaming in worry. "Sir, are you okay?" The Sector C lackeys casually stood there smoking. One guy laughed smugly. "Scared the crap out of me, thought it was a guard. You want to drag too?" These guys actually know fear, huh? Witnessing the old man in critical condition, Wang Hee-wook's anger exploded. "What if his heart stops? You guys have gone too far!" Immediately, a heavy punch slammed into his face. The guy roared, "Who do you think you are trying to give me orders?" They continued to laugh mockingly with disdain. "Hey, take it easy, the kid is crying." However, Wang Hee-wook's patience had reached its absolute limit. He suddenly unleashed a lightning-fast punch that the guy across from him couldn't react to. The lackeys froze in shock, seeing the usually gentle guy suddenly turn into a monster. Wang Hee-wook roared with a murderous aura. "Come at me all at once, you bastards!" Min-soo and Hyun-jun watched in shock as the chaotic scene unfolded inside. After the brawl, Wang Hee-wook lay slumped on the floor, severely injured, leaving Hyun-jun to just cry out his name in despair. Taking advantage of the empty area, Min-soo hurriedly found Yoo-seong. He grabbed his brother's shoulders and pleaded desperately. "Bro, please save my friend!" Yoo-seong sighed in deep exhaustion. He reminded Min-soo that even out here, he was still constantly causing trouble. He demanded Min-soo hold back because if a major incident happened here, things would get incredibly worse. Disappointed by his brother's excessive caution, Min-soo snapped, "Forget it! I was an idiot for trusting you." He decisively turned and walked away, even as Yoo-seong called after him, Min-soo. If I didn't hear incorrectly? A heavy footstep and a raspy voice from behind made both brothers freeze. The fake officer loomed closer, his eyes narrowing with calculation. "I definitely heard you call him brother." Yoo-seong sweated bullets, frantically trying to cover it up. "Oh no, that was..." But the sly old fox wasn't easily fooled. He asserted he had thought it strange for a long time how Yoo-seong always treated Min-soo much more specially than other inmates. "Spit it out. What is the relationship between you two?" The fake officer's question felt like a bucket of cold water dumped straight onto Yoo-seong, freezing him in shock. Yoo-seong sweated profusely, trying to keep calm and make an excuse. "Ah, no, that's not it at all, sir." Standing behind him, Min-soo couldn't help but tremble as well. He silently blamed himself. One moment of carelessness almost exposed both of their identities. Right in that critical life-or-death moment from a distance, a hand suddenly raised and shouted loudly. "Big bro!" It was Sejin. He looked at Yoo-seong and said, "I've been looking everywhere for you." This spectacular plot twist completely stopped the fake officer in his tracks. He muttered suspiciously upon hearing Sejin call Yoo-seong Big Bro. Yoo-seong let out a quiet sigh of relief, silently thanking Sejun's quick thinking for saving him from an obvious defeat. The fake officer gave a cold huff. He noted that this place truly needed much stricter supervision, then turned and walked away. "Sergeant Kang, I'll let this slide this time, but be careful." The old man's warning left Yusong bowing his head in apology. "Yes, I'll be careful, sir." The moment the old man was out of sight, Yusong covered his face with his hand. His breathing was still ragged with fear. I was almost exposed. At this rate, my identity will be revealed sooner or later." Meanwhile, those two knuckleheads were still growling at each other. "Hey, thanks. Don't misunderstand. I had no intention of helping you. I just didn't want him interfering." Sejun smirked, looking at Minsu. He unexpectedly made a very serious proposal. "This time, we should focus on the battle for the boss position, shouldn't we?" Minsu replied with equal fiery spirit. "That's right. Let's do this." Suddenly finding some solidarity together. However, the excitement of both was instantly snuffed out when Yusong rushed over, roughly grabbing both their collars and lifting them up. "Stop it right now!" He scolded them fiercely because Minsu's carelessness almost ruined the entire plan. Yusong roared in fury. "More importantly, do you two really not know how to wait? Those bastards have crossed the line." He got right in Minsu's face, growling as he asked if the kid really wanted to rot in this hellhole forever. Yusong coldly assigned a task to Sejun. "Sejun, you handle him." Even though Sejun was still wondering why the target was Wang He-wook, Yusong immediately shut him down with a stern threat. "You better just listen. If you don't follow my orders, I'll double your training load." Right after that, the atmosphere suddenly took a bizarre turn when the nursing home staff cheerfully handed each inmate a medical incontinence pad. In reality, there were many elderly people here who frequently had bathroom emergencies. These adult diapers were provided as a lifesaver for those who couldn't control their bodily functions. One inmate was awkwardly helping an old man put on a diaper and received a sincere thank you. "Thank you, young man." He could only reply bashfully, "It's nothing, sir." However, trouble started brewing when Minsu tried to find where the rest of the diapers were. He was shocked to realize the entire reserve supply of diapers had completely vanished. "Hey, where did all the diapers go?" Suddenly, a desperate cry for help shattered the silence. "Save me!" While Minsu was still confused, an unimaginable sight caught his eye. His cellmates suddenly appeared wearing armor fashioned from adult diapers, striking epic superhero poses together. They clearly declared, "It's time to roll out, the Diaper Rangers." Minsu could only stand frozen in helplessness, blurting out, "What the hell are you guys doing with those diapers?" Seeing the situation was too chaotic and ridiculous, Sejun quietly walked away. Minsu quickly called after him, but only got a cold reply. "Don't get in my way. I just want to finish this quickly." The Diaper Rangers were still extremely excited. They asserted they weren't joking around and had created a true monster to protect the world. And that monster was Wang Hyuk. Witnessing this scene, Minsu couldn't hold back his fury. He roared, "You bastards! What the hell are you doing with the elderly's diapers?" Just as Minsu was about to charge in and intervene, Sejun intervened, blocking him with his arm and coldly reminding him, "Stay calm." Minsu glared at Sejun angrily. "Don't stop me, or do you want to fight me first?" Sejun maintained his calm demeanor, pointing toward the guard who was getting ready to take photos for the report, and said that now was not the time to cause trouble. Minsu gritted his teeth and held back. He understood that if he attacked now, he would be the one in massive trouble with the higher-ups. Better to avoid the elephant than lose face, right, guys? Meanwhile, rumors about the recent earth-shattering battle began spreading throughout the reform center. The inmates chattered about how Minsu had taken down the top dogs and would likely become the new boss. However, some remained skeptical, believing his golden era wouldn't last long. In a secluded corner, the powerful figures were secretly discussing the selection of special candidates to elevate to a higher position. The name Im Jisoo was unexpectedly brought up as the heaviest contender. And the mastermind behind this game wondered curiously if Jisoo would truly be overshadowed by a newcomer like Minsu. Sejun walked down the hallway amidst the wary stares of the other inmates. He told himself this wasn't really about revenge, but simply that he needed to prove his capabilities to those watching. Sejun was determined to defeat the one standing in his way and reassert his position once again. At the same time, Minsu was also struggling fiercely internally. He realized Sejun was right to advise patience. Minsu told himself he had to endure a little longer to completely resolve the troubles in his cell, and absolutely couldn't let Wang Hewook fall into the malicious trap of the Sector C lackeys again. A lesson learned: patience is a virtue. However, the tree wants to be still, but the wind won't stop. While walking down the hallway, a foot suddenly stuck out to trip him, sending him tumbling. The bullies laughed despicably. "What are you doing tripping over yourself like an idiot?" At this point, Minsu's limit for patience completely shattered. He screamed in a frenzy. "Damn it! I don't want to think anymore, you bastards! I'm going to kill all of you today!" Just as Minsu was about to explode, a hand unexpectedly held out a piece of tissue to him, and a gentle voice asked, "Are you all right? Luckily, you're not hurt too badly." A sweet voice rang out as the woman in the volunteer uniform approached to help, giving a soft smile. Then she unexpectedly turned, touching Minsu's face, and dropped a line that froze him in place. "You're just as stubborn as your older brother, aren't you?" Minsu was stunned, stammering, "Older brother? How do you know my brother?" Realizing she slipped up, she just gave a knowing smile. "Ah, that was supposed to be a secret, wasn't it? Well then, just pretend it's a secret." Minsu's eyes widened when he saw the name tag pinned to her chest. Gasemin. She slightly turned her head back, entrusting him with a sincere request. "Please take care of my little brother, Minsu." The name Gasemin echoed like a thunderclap, leaving Minsu completely paralyzed in shock. "Gasemin, no way!" Memories of the battle with Sejun suddenly flooded back. He remembered the magic keyword Yuseong had taught him to subdue that beast. Is Gasemin pretty? It was this exact question that had once made Sejun completely lose his mind and fall into the trap. Yuseong had calculated everything. He wanted Minsu to use this exact weakness to deal with the bosses in the cell. On the rooftop of the nursing home, Yuseong and Gasemin were having a private meeting. Yuseong approached, handing her a can of soda as thanks. "You've worked hard, haven't you?" Semin smirked, asking if he used his own money to buy it. But Yuseong casually admitted it was actually a bribe. He sincerely thanked her, because thanks to Semin's help, his job had become much easier. Semin leaned lightly against the railing, gazing off into the distance toward the reform center. She admitted she wasn't doing all this out of kindness, but simply because she couldn't leave her idiot little brother to fend for himself in that hellhole. Yuseong stood quietly beside her. He understood that feeling better than anyone, as both of them were risking everything to protect their misguided younger brothers. "These kids are so stubborn, thinking they're the best in this society." Semin unexpectedly asked if he had ever heard of the Red Prison, making Yuseong ponder the isolated area where only those in red uniforms were allowed. He wondered to himself if there was any way to infiltrate that heavily guarded place. Seeing it was getting late, Yuseong urged Semin to head back and reassured himself that since he had tasked Sejun with protecting Minsu, he could relax for now. Semin smiled, asserting that Sejun was actually very gentle and would never attack someone without a good reason. Yuseong looked skeptical, but Semin maintained absolute faith in her brother's calm demeanor. Semin was absolutely certain her brother would never be the one to start a fight. "Don't count your chickens before they hatch, reality ain't a dream." Yuseong nodded in agreement, figuring neither of them needed to worry because there was no reason for their two younger brothers to jump into a brawl. However, the reality was a brutal free-for-all brawl happening right at the volunteer site. Instead of fighting each other, Minsu and Sejun were fighting side by side, frantically raining blows down on the enemies surrounding them. The two stood back to back with eyes burning with murderous intent, ready to crush anyone who dared stand in their way. The crowd of inmates around them started cheering wildly. "A fight! A fight!" Minsu and Sejun are fighting. Minsu realized the battle for the boss title he had been waiting for had finally begun. Minsu smirked, challenging him. "Are you ready to lose your title?" Sejun growled back. "Shut up and fight. I'll show you the difference between a pro and a brat." Taeho's lackeys stood on the sidelines, continuously adding fuel to the fire, looking forward to a bloody purge. Sejun coldly asserted he would make his opponents regret ever stepping foot in this place. However, an unexpected development occurred when Minsu and Sejun simultaneously turned to attack Taeho's goons instead of fighting each other. The Sector C lackeys panicked, screaming in pain. "What the hell is this? Why are both of them attacking us at the same time? Minsu struck decisively, asserting that trash needed to be cleaned up first. Sejun, with a steely face, declared he would make these bastards pay dearly for daring to cause chaos and disrupt the order in his room. In the storage room area, the old fake officer casually lit a cigarette and asked, "How is it?" Unbelievably, he was respectfully lighting a cigarette for the rat-faced guy, behaving like an obsequious suck-up. They laughed maliciously, smug because those unruly kids had absolutely no idea what was waiting for them ahead. The rat-faced guy reminded the guard to keep a special eye on Minsu, because he was the most special and unpredictable variable in this entire plan. The guard, after receiving a thick envelope from him, immediately acted as obedient as a loyal dog. The scene at the nursing home instantly plunged into chaos, sending the guards into extreme panic. One shouted helplessly that this was something only the director could handle, while another ran off frantically to report that Sejun was going crazy and knocking everyone out. The situation was so severe that the officers started regretting letting a troublemaker like Sejun join this trip. Watching from a distance, Seimin could only cross her arms and sigh in exasperation at her brother's unchanging violent nature. Meanwhile, the Sector C lackeys screamed frantically, ordering their crew to completely crush Sejun at all costs to regain their honor. However, Sejun remained towering like a beast among wolves. With decisive movements, Sejun executed ruthless takedown techniques that left the surrounding crowd utterly terrified. Even faced with being surrounded by 6 guys at once, he didn't flinch but became even more ferocious. "How dare you touch Moon? No! Someone from my room?" But instantly, the crowd took the opportunity to rush in and tightly restrain the boss of Room A. Sejun gritted his teeth, cursing internally for accidentally stepping into a highly troublesome, unplanned battle. Seeing his friend getting mobbed, Minsu immediately jumped in to help him break out. After kicking one guy down, he threw a low blow at another's weak spot. Sejun also used this chance to break free, punching away the guy holding his arm. Sejun began to stay calm, calculating the blind spots to find a path for a counterattack. A large guy swung a ton-heavy punch straight at Sejun's face, roaring victoriously that he was out of options and couldn't run anymore. Immediately, Sejun unleashed a lightning-fast punch that sent the massive inmate crumbling to the ground with a painful groan. Witnessing that from afar, Minsu was shocked to realize the beast within Sejun had truly awakened. That monster seems like he's not holding back anymore. Unwilling to be outdone, Minsu also burned with resolve. "But me too. I've become much stronger than before." He threw himself into the fight with a powerful punch, proving he was no longer the weakling from before. The two stood back to back, surrounded by the enemy. Sejun coldly warned the other not to get in his way, while Minsu shot back sharply, telling him not to be a burden. Minsu roared furiously when he was called a mama's boy, despite having just saved someone. Sejun impatiently asked if he was done talking, and the two almost even started fighting each other right in the middle of the crowd of defeated enemies lying at their feet. Finally, Sejun yielded and declared he would let Minsu be the leader this time. Suddenly, a giant appeared and delivered a kick that sent Minsu flying backward. He disdainfully called them brats and asserted they had no right to cause a ruckus here. As this authoritative stranger loomed closer, Sejun decisively threw a kick at his face, but this time, it did absolutely nothing. The giant smirked, praising them for being pretty strong, but then coldly asserted that he was much stronger than that. From above, Taeho smirked arrogantly, asserting everything was still under his control. Right after that, Minsu unexpectedly had a black bag shoved over his head, leaving him in shock as his vision suddenly went entirely dark. Taking advantage of Minsu being unable to see, Taeho frantically unleashed vicious kicks, screaming at him to be obedient while he was still playing nice. He gloated, declaring that what he truly desired was a powerful subordinate like Ga Sejun. However, Taeho confidently asserted that his own Taeho was many times stronger than Sejun. Taeho arrogantly claimed that no matter how strong Sejun was, he couldn't face the monster he possessed. Taeho smugly introduced that his Taeho, though only rank D, possessed the pure physical strength of a true rank A. Sejun struggled to defend himself. He was shocked to realize this giant was intentionally taking hits just to find an opening for a ruthless counterattack. A flurry of punches drilled straight into him, putting Sejun in a perilous situation. He bitterly told himself that if this continued, he would definitely taste humiliating defeat again like before. Sejun was determined to counterattack immediately to turn the tables, but reality was incredibly cruel. His body seemed to have reached its absolute limit and was no longer obeying his brain's commands. Taeho's heavy punches rained down relentlessly, causing Sejun's vision to blur and his consciousness to spin. In extreme agony, Sejun realized in shock that darkness was slowly enveloping him as his opponent completely overwhelmed him with sheer physical strength. Sejun passed out, haunted by the nightmare of failing yet again in complete helplessness. The scene unexpectedly shifted to the solitary ward, where Yusong was standing, looking at an emaciated Sejun behind bars. He coldly questioned if Sejun was content living as a loser forever. Yusong asserted Sejun shouldn't be in this pathetic state, and offered a heavy suggestion to change his future. Sejun looked up with eyes burning with resolve, stating he knew exactly what to do to ensure he would never have regrets again. Back at the scene, Taeho laughed arrogantly, declaring the winner had been decided, and Sejun was now just a defeated loser completely unable to fight back. He insulted his opponent's weakness and claimed there was no difference in class between them to begin with. Sejun lay slumped on the ground, but even with his face bloody and bruised, Sejun pushed himself up, his eyes burning with unwavering determination. "I'll show you exactly what a difference in class is." Seeing his opponent still hadn't given up, Taeho screamed in excitement. "That's right, it's only worth crushing you if you fight back." He threw a ton-heavy punch straight at Sejun, but was shocked to see the strike blocked. "What the hell is this? Are you just going to defend?" Taeho frantically rained a flurry of blows down on Sejun's guarding arms, screaming, "This is so boring!" Taeho frantically rained a flurry of blows down on Sejun's guarding arms, screaming, "This is so boring! Sejun, fight back harder!" Sejun remained stubbornly taking the hits under the lightning-fast punches, ignoring Taeho's taunts. "Are you just going to stand there and take it?" In that moment, memories of his special training with Yusong came flooding back. Yusong clearly instructed, "Don't just take the hits, shift the point of contact." He demonstrated an elegant technique to neutralize the opponent's striking force. Yusong reminded him that instead of absorbing it directly, he should learn to redirect that power elsewhere. Back in reality, Sejun unexpectedly executed a masterful parry that sent Taeho's punch flying up into the air. Taeho gasped in shock. "What? Did he just parry that?" The scene flashed back to the training session in the shower room, where Sejun questioned whether shifting the point of contact could really minimize damage. Yusong gently pushed up his glasses, asserting it was the key to victory against massive opponents. He asked seriously if Sejun was ready to apply it in a real fight.